Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Seeing a little girl singing at the fountain, the widower hurried to give her some change. And noticing the bracelet on her hand, Adrian slowly walked down the main street of the city. Recently, the office of the company, where the man had been working as an engineer for almost 15 years, had moved to a new building. On the one hand, it was harder to get to work farther from home, plus traffic jams in the mornings and evenings. On the other hand, the building itself was beautiful and bright, and the cityscape around it was pleasing to the eye. Smart people, squares, fountains, picturesque parks, the center of the city, after all. Adrian had recently made it a rule not to rush immediately after the end of the working day to the parking lot, but to walk for a while in the streets. It was a kind of relaxation. Every day here felt like a holiday. Children with balloons and ice cream, horses drawn in carriages. By the time you drove back and forth, there would be no evening traffic, and you could get into the car and go home. Since Stacy had moved in with Adrian, coming home had been much more pleasant. The apartment smelled different now, fresh baked goods, delicious home-cooked food, feminine perfumes and creams. Cozy, cozy, cozy smells. And Stacy herself was cozy, warm, kind. Adrian's heart gradually thawed beside her. He'd been through a lot. Not everyone has to go through what happened to Adrian's family. The man thought he was no longer capable of strong feelings. But Stacy, she was a real revelation to him. It turns out there could be joy in his life. Quiet, so calm, so peaceful, watching TV shows together in the evening, going on picnics with friends, traveling to the sea in the velvet season. And yet the heavy thoughts did not let Adrian go until the end. There was a feeling of understatement, uncertainty. And how could it be otherwise, when it was still unknown what had happened to Amelie? Young parents with young children, especially girls of 4 or 5, still caught Adrian's eye. Right now, he was looking at a family walking just ahead of him. A young, slender mom. The father of the family in a brightly colored print t-shirt and jean shorts. 2 children, a boy about 8 years old and a 4-year-old toddler. The boy walked with an impassive, bored look. Perhaps he didn't want to go for a walk with his family. The girl, on the other hand, she looked around with curious eyes and asked questions. The parents, Adrian could clearly see, were a little tired of their youngest daughter's sociability. The mother answered one-word answers. The father, in general, several times irritably asked the child to be quiet. Oh, young people. They do not understand what happiness it is to walk with a little daughter by the hand, to talk to her. Adrian would now gladly answer a million questions of a 4-year-old girl. Not for nothing they say what we have do not keep. But why not keep it? Years ago, Adrian quite consciously enjoyed fatherhood. His daughter Amelie never annoyed him like this young father, nor did she tire him like her mother, who walked with an unhappy face slightly away from him. Perhaps it was because he and Tiana had waited so long for this child. Adrian and Tiana had met at the institute, studying related engineering specialties. They shared many of the same lectures. Adrian immediately noticed the pretty, quiet student with the big blue eyes. It wasn't surprising there weren't many girls in their department. And yet Tiana stood out from the rest. Blonde, wavy hair, wide open eyes, straight features. But Adrian wasn't just attracted by her good looks. Unlike the other girls, Tiana didn't make eyes at guys. She was genuinely interested in the subject, just as Adrian was. And young men who tried to get involved with her were sharply rejected. Adrian took a chance one day. He was paired with Tiana. They were to work on a project together. Well, it was that work that brought them together. They became a very cohesive team. And that's how they became a friendship, which later grew into something more. Tiana and Adrian had a lot in common. They grew up in roughly the same families and were into the same things. Even their plans for life were similar in many ways. Both wanted to first build careers, to achieve something, to find their place, and then to have offspring. The young people got married and rented an apartment. Tiana got a job in a laboratory at the Research Institute, continued her scientific work. Adrian chose to practice and went to the engineering department at the factory. At first, both received literally pennies. Then the spouses began to grow in their careers. Income increased. Soon they were able to buy their own apartment and make repairs in it. The newlyweds lived soul to soul. Adrian was so easy, so pleasant next to Tiana. She understood him with half a word, and he, accordingly, also understood her. There were no loud arguments and quarrels between them. All matters were settled by negotiation and discussion of facts and opinions. His mother often told Adrian that no girl would get along with him, so pedantic and correct. She was wrong. Tiana was as rational and conscientious as he was. It turned out that they had found each other. Adrian was happy. Everything in his life was working out even better than he had ever dreamed. The couple tried to take vacation days. Together they liked to travel around Russia. They went to Altai and Karelia and climbed mountains and admired Baikal. It was so great to get acquainted with all this splendor together with the same enthusiastic and delighted wife. 7 years had passed since the wedding. When Adrian and Tiana started talking about children, the material base for future heirs was prepared. Grandmothers on both sides have long been waiting for grandchildren and vowed to look after the kids, and with great pleasure. Accordingly, Tiana would not have to sacrifice her career at the Research Institute, and the couple themselves already wanted children. Adrian imagined how he would introduce his son or daughter to the world, tell this little man about everything, and Tiana would make a wonderful mother. She is so attentive, so sensitive, so wise. The couple consciously decided to approach the issue of childbearing. First, they were fully examined to reduce the chances of an unhealthy baby. That's when it became clear that Tiana had female problems. Very serious ones. Pregnancy is practically impossible, said the verdict of the doctor, Professor Ivanov, to whom Tiana with such difficulty managed to make an appointment. What, no chance at all, Adrian clarified. He had accompanied his spouse to the clinic that day. But it is possible to try different treatment options, the doctor replied evasively. Only all these methods are expensive and time-consuming, and I can't guarantee the result. Congenital anomalies of development. It happens, unfortunately. This was a blow to the couple. Until now, they had everything worked out, everything went according to plan. And then all of a sudden this happened. And even after the professor's disappointing verdict, both Adrian and Tiana suddenly realized how much they wanted to be parents, and so began a period of treatment. Wandering around doctors, taking endless tests, Tiana's periodic hospitalizations. All this took a lot of money and time, and most importantly, moral strength. It was very hard at first to hope, to fulfill all doctors' prescriptions, and then to be disappointed time after time. Always calm, rational Tiana now often cried when she thought that her husband did not see. But he noticed everything: her red eyes and puffy eyelids. And worst of all, the desperate look of pain in her eyes. It was hard for Adrian to see his wife like that. His main desire now was not a child, but the peace and happiness of the woman he loved. But how to help Tiana? Adrian did not know the answer to this question. The man, as he could, supported his wife, sought for her consultations in the best reproductive centers in the country, went with her to painful procedures, calmed her down. Maybe we should give up this idea, he sometimes suggested. The race to have a baby has already taken on a kind of unhealthy character. I feel like stopping it. Let's develop our careers. That's important too, isn't it? Once upon a time, work, academia, that was the main thing in Tiana's life. The woman's eyes lit up when she talked about a new development or experimental project. Work inspired Tiana, gave her strength and energy, and she was good at what she did. Very good. She was respected. She was invited to consultations. She was approached with difficult questions. Adrian was happy for his wife and proud of her. He understood Tiana. The man himself gave a lot of time and effort to the plant and was also considered a first-class specialist, but the spouses acted in slightly different fields. Now Tiana had changed a lot. She no longer took on interesting projects, served in the laboratory from call to call, and hurried home. The once prominent scientist now preferred simple chores and had completely abandoned her research. This truly frightened Adrian. He understood, of course, that the female body is organized differently than the male. The female sex is more susceptible to the influence of hormones. The maternal instinct is a great power and all that. But still, the changes that were happening to Tiana were alarming. She had become lethargic, irritable, even somewhat cranky. This once pleasant woman was fixated on this most inaccessible motherhood, made the child as an idea fix, and nothing else interested her. Nothing else pleased and fascinated her. She even stopped communicating with her friends and colleagues. Tiana devoted all her free time to studying information about her diagnosis. Several long years passed. During this period, Tiana calmed down and returned to work for a while. But the dream of becoming a mother did not let her go until the end, and sooner or later everything resumed: trips to doctors, tests, research. Medicine does not stand still. New reproductive technologies appear. Old ones are being improved. You have to try, was how Tiana explained her behavior to her husband. Adrian missed the old Tiana, smart, purposeful, understanding. Sometimes she came back for a while, and it was a real happiness. They talked about different topics again, watched movies together, planned trips. Why don't we take the baby out of the orphanage? With this proposal, Adrian addressed his wife more than once. He thought that a child, even if it was not his own, would make Tiana happy, help her finally feel like a mother. But she, Tiana, needed only her child, and she went to her goal, not noticing nothing and no one around. After about 15 years of marriage, the long-awaited pregnancy finally happened. Another experimental treatment helped. Adrian and Tiana were almost 40 years old at the time. The man did not expect such a result. The news came as a surprise to him and even frightened him a little, knocked him out of his rut. So many years to live with his wife, only the two of them. And here. But Tiana was happy without any reservations. Despite the wild nausea, because of which the woman could not eat at all in the first months, despite the constant pain in the abdomen and lower back, despite the dizziness, Tiana tolerated pregnancy badly. She almost never left the hospital, constantly lying under some drips, drank handfuls of medicines, endured painful injections. Several times there was a threat of miscarriage. Adrian could not imagine what would have happened to Tiana if. But the doctors managed to keep the complicated pregnancy going, because Tiana was under special supervision. To be honest, Adrian had no warm feelings for the future child. He saw it as a problem, as an obstacle that prevented his wife from living a normal, full life. And then Amelie was born, and Adrian was the first to hold that tiny, wrinkled red creature in his arms. Tiana insisted that her husband attend the birth with her. "It's such an event, long awaited and huge," she said. "So many problems and trials are behind us, and here it is, the prize. Besides, the doctors say that we will definitely not have more children. So." Adrian didn't want to be in the delivery room, and he was intimidated by the process, and he had no reverence for the whole thing, but he had to. At the moment when Adrian first looked at the face of his newborn daughter, the man suddenly felt that the world for him turned upside down, became completely different. The baby screamed loudly, making everyone aware of the expressive changes that had happened to her, and the man realized that his girl was cold, terribly hurt. He felt it in his gut. Adrian pressed his daughter to him, gently rocked her in his arms. The girl sobbed, looked at him a couple more times, and calmed down. She felt safe around her father. Adrian realized that the daughter is now the closest, dearest person to him, that he, for her sake, he would roll mountains and get the moon from the sky. Then the child was given to her mother. The girl had to be fed, and Adrian was asked to leave the room. "I'll see you at the discharge," the midwife smiled. Now the mother and the baby needed some time alone. Adrian and Tiana were wonderful parents. They could spend hours just admiring their little Amelie. They were fascinated by everything about her, and how she tried to reach for a toy, and how she jumped with her hands and feet, and how the first smile appeared, the first tooth, the first tentative steps. It was all becoming a huge event for the new parents. Adrian had to leave for work every morning. Tiana stayed with Amelie. She completely dissolved in motherhood. The woman had waited so long for this. Tiana practiced a lot with Amelie, gave her massages, cooked delicious baby food for her, and took her for walks. With her usual zeal, Tiana studied the literature on the development of young children and practiced her new knowledge on her own child. In many ways, Amelie learned new skills faster than her peers. She spoke early. She learned to draw, sculpt, and button early. Adrian and Tiana couldn't get enough of their daughter. She was such a clever girl, such a beauty. Outwardly, Amelie resembled Adrian's grandmother: thick, dark hair, huge brown eyes, dark skin. Nothing of me, the blonde-haired, fair-skinned Tiana marveled. Nothing surprising, Adrian joked. They say dark genes are stronger. That's fine. But what a bright girl she's growing up to be. Black eyebrows, long, dark eyelashes. She won't even have to wear makeup. She'll save on cosmetics. Amelie grew up an affectionate, obedient girl and very inquisitive. The child inherited a passion for exploring the world from both parents. Tiana was very worried about this peculiarity of her daughter. Amelie climbed everywhere. She was interested in what is on the top shelves of the closet, how the alarm clock is organized, how deep the puddles. She climbed trees to get a better look at fruits or flowers, and sat above open hatches, peering intently into the darkness. "He'll fall off someday and hurt himself," Tiana complained. "I'll keep an eye on that little brat." "Yes," Adrian agreed. "She's a quick little girl." The man was proud that his daughter was so inquisitive. Tiana was too. But she was tired of watching the active child around the clock. Only here on the fate of the woman did not complain. All the troubles associated with her daughter gave her great pleasure. Sometimes it seemed to Adrian that his wife was overprotective of their only child. It would be easier to treat some things, to give the girl more independence, which she so aspired to. But in the upbringing of Amelie, he tried not to interfere. First, the spouses who have read a mountain of literature about children are more discerning. Secondly, Tiana had dreamed of motherhood for so long, and she was already a mother at a mature age. In their situation, it was easy to turn a blind eye to some things. Amelie adored her parents. She always looked forward to when her father came home from work, to climb on his lap and ask him a million questions, and to play the fun and noisy games that Tiana was incapable of: pillow fights, catch-up, hide and seek. Adrian liked to take his daughter for a walk in the park after work. Sometimes Tiana would go with him, but more often she stayed home to clean up in peace and quiet, cook a delicious dinner, a break from the noisy child, after all. At first, father and daughter strolled along the alleys and talked about serious topics, speculated about where flies and fairy bugs wintered, and about the life of the mysterious inhabitants of the pond. They discussed the cartoons Amelie had watched during the day. Adrian smiled as he looked at his daughter, who was so serious and sensible. He thought that she must have a great future ahead of her. Then Adrian took his daughter to the playground and the fun began. Amelie rolled down the slide, climbed the stairs. She didn't do that in front of her mother. She was too worried about her long-awaited treasure. And Amel also had to get acquainted with the kids right away. The children loved the cheerful and sociable girl. Adrian was pleased that his child so easily finds a common language with peers. The attentive father was sure that his daughter would like it in kindergarten. But Tiana resisted the idea. "I quit my job on purpose to take care of the girl myself. I didn't give birth to her to dump her on the state. No, I intend to enjoy motherhood to the fullest. So what? Kindergarten is just daycare for the children of working parents." I'm doing a lot with our girl. I'm developing her. No, let her be with me. It's better that way. Adrian didn't argue, but every once in a while he'd bring up daycare again. There are children there, songs, dances. Tiana prepared her daughter for a career in science, thought that she must follow in her footsteps. And the girl seemed to be doing well. Amélie grasped everything on the fly. Her brain was working, of course, as it should. But Adrian noticed other talents in his daughter. Amélie had an amazing voice, clear, high. When the little girl sang songs from cartoons, Adrian involuntarily froze. He himself once long ago attended music school. He had not achieved any particular success in this field, but the knowledge he had gained was enough to realize that Amélie had a wonderful ear. She reproduced the melodies very accurately. It was a miracle. Another little miracle from Amélie. Maybe we should take her to a music teacher for an audition. Amélie is clearly a talent, Adrian suggested to his wife. She's still a little girl, Tiana said. In music school from the age of 6 or 7 years old. And our daughter does not need it. She will be a major scientist. You'll see. After the baby was born, Tiana felt happy, but she was never the same. She was very anxious, too focused on the baby. Still, it was better than the state she was in when she was trying to get pregnant. Adrian still loved her, loved Tiana, even perhaps more than he had when they were young. They had become very close. They're having a wonderful baby. It's such a blessing. Adrian tried not to pay attention to little things like Tiana's focus on the baby and her excessive anxiety about her daughter. He understood why his wife behaved like that. The man himself often spoiled his daughter. Coming home from work, he bought her gifts just for fun, without reason, sweets, dolls, stuffed animals. It was a joy to see Tiana and Amélie light up with joy at the sight of the surprise her father took out of the bag. And even more so when the little girl hugged him with her little arms and whispered, "Thank you, Daddy." Adrian's heart melted with tenderness. He had never imagined it was possible to have such strong feelings for someone. Tiana always tried to make her daughter's birthdays bright and beautiful. She prepared for a grand celebration in advance. She thought up the theme, chose gifts, bought or prepared her own decorations. The second birthday of her daughter was held in the style of Disney princesses. The little girl then adored these cartoons. The third birthday was a ball in the palace of the Underwater King, as Amélie at that age was carried away by a fairy tale about mermaids. The fourth birthday of the girl was held in the land of unicorns. Yes, Tiana managed the almost impossible. In just an hour, she turned the apartment into a magical place, a haven for these fantastic animals. Amélie then adored unicorns, watched cartoons about them, drew them, molded fabulous characters from plasticine. "I wish I could ride one," she said dreamily. Tiana just smiled and waved her hands. "Daughter, you understand, a unicorn. They live so far away, they don't come to our place." "I understand, and it's a pity." Amélie sighed. Adrian decided to fulfill his daughter's birthday dream by all means. Adrian went to the racetrack and talked to the pony trainers. He had a wonderful idea and tried to make it a reality. One of the girl instructors was enthusiastic about Adrian's plan. Together they came up with masquerade costumes for a beautiful white pony, which was to represent a unicorn, a twisted plastic mane, Velcro, pink ribbons for the mane and tail, aqua makeup, which was planned to draw hearts on the sides of the animal, a wreath of artificial flowers. All this was to turn a small horse into a fairy tale character. Adrian anticipated in advance how excited his little girl would be. This pleasure, of course, cost a lot of money. But wouldn't you do anything for your favorite little princess? When the main surprise was ready, Adrian thought about the gift. It had to be something themed and very beautiful. The man ordered a plush unicorn through acquaintances from abroad. At that time, there was no such abundance of different toys in children's stores. To get the original character was almost impossible. But the loving father did not stop there. Because the daughter is already 4 years old, she already knows a lot, understands a lot. It is time to give her something beautiful and elegant, purely feminine. Let her get used to it from a young age, Adrian decided. And he ordered in the jewelry workshop a wonderful set of silver bracelet and earrings, made in the form of tiny unicorns, covered with pink enamel. The man had been looking for a master ready to take on such an order for a very long time. The work was difficult. Professionals simply did not want to get involved. In the end, one elderly jeweler decided to do it. He worked for a long time, all the time remodeling and improving something. But in the end, the result was so beautiful that Adrian could not help but sigh in admiration when he saw the set for the first time. Tiana was delighted too. "My God, what a miracle it is." The woman shook her head. "I've never seen anything like it. You are so good." "There is nothing else like it in the world," Adrian assured her, enjoying his wife's reaction. "It's exclusive to Amelie. Look, it has her name engraved in calligraphy on the back of the bracelet. It's so beautiful and sophisticated. A gift for a real lady. Amelie's 4th birthday went just fine. It was perfect." The girl woke up in an apartment decorated with balloons, bright pictures, and cardboard decorations from the unicorn world. Next to her crib was a chair littered with gifts from her parents. There were toys, dressy dresses, and brightly colored books. But more than other gifts, the girl was impressed by the jewelry with unicorns. She asked to put the bracelet on her arm and has not taken it off since. Adrian looked at his happy daughter and smiled. Then all 3 of them prepared for the guests. They prepared salads, baked a delicious cake, and then decorated it with figures made of mastic. Amelie worked very hard. In the evening, the guests came, and the apartment immediately became noisy and cheerful. Grandparents, Tiana and Adriana's acquaintances with children of Amelie's age. The birthday girl was showered with gifts and compliments. But she was not only accepting congratulations, the girl herself wanted to surprise the guests. Amelie in her princess dress stood on a chair and sang for everyone a song from her favorite cartoon about a unicorn. Adrian listened to the pure, ringing voice of his girl, and his heart shrank with tenderness and joy. Wow! What a miracle fate had bestowed upon him and Tiana. A beautiful, talented daughter, thought the man at that moment for the umpteenth time that he would do everything for Amelie's happiness. Guests applauded loudly, several times called the singer for an encore. Amelie did not refuse. She liked to be the center of attention, liked to sing, liked to receive compliments. Bold, daring, artistic. Adrian decided then that, despite his wife's plans, their girl would still shine on stage. Tiana will understand, he said to himself. And then it was time for the big surprise. Children and adults poured out into the street, huddled on the front porch. A real unicorn was coming toward them from the archway. Amelie jumped with delight. The other children immediately followed suit. Next to the unicorn was a young fairy. The girl instructor tried to let her blonde curls loose on her shoulders and wore a light, long sundress with flowers. Can I go to him?" Amelie asked the fairy, not believing her happiness. She almost cried with delight. Her biggest dream had come true. "Of course you can. He'll be happy to take you for a ride," answered the fairy. Amelie made 2 honorable circles around the yard, then jumped down from the unicorn, stroked his face, and asked, "Can he ride my guest too?" "Of course, he's here to make your party perfect." The little guests took turns to sit on the unicorn's back and rode around the yard with joyful, shining faces. Amelie's party was unforgettable for them as well. Adrian looked at his girl and thought that she was not only smart and beautiful, but also very kind and sensitive. She took care of others. At the age of 4, she asked the fairy to give her little guests a ride on a unicorn. What 4-year-old could have thought of that? It was a wonderful day. From it all, those involved left a lot of bright impressions and no less bright photos. On one photo, Emily was captured in the arms of a new plush unicorn. A silver bracelet glistened on her wrist. A thin tiara crowned her head. The girl smiled broadly into the lens. She was truly happy at this moment. It was this picture that Tiana handed over to the investigators just 3 months later. It happened on a warm and sunny September evening. It was Indian summer, the most wonderful season of autumn golden trees, illuminated by the gentle sun, leaves rustling underfoot. That evening, Tiana and Amelie decided not to stay at home and took advantage of the wonderful weather to take a walk in the park. The more so because of the City Day festivities. My wife called Adrian too. It would be great to walk through the park as a family, the three of us. But the man refused. He had a lot of work he had taken home from the factory. They had a serious inspection on the way from New York, some reports that needed to be finished urgently. No, unfortunately, I will not be able to accompany my two beautiful ladies. Adrian shook his head, although I would like it very much. Amelie pouted. She was charming in her light red dress and red beret, flirtatiously pushed to the side. Two tight pigtails decorated with pink silk ribbons rested on her shoulders. On her feet were new patent shoes, not quite modern. The image was original and charming. Tiana tried to dress the girl like a doll, looking for stylish and unusual things for her. Emily almost always stood out among the other children. Okay, fine, but I have to work. Adrian waved his hands. But don't worry. This weekend I'll go with you to the ponds. I promise. The ponds. Amelie was so excited. That's great. We'll ride the Ferris wheel and feed the ducks buns. Yes? Yes, Adrian smiled. And then we'll go to the cafe. Do you have your favorite berry pancakes? Okay? All right. Now you two have fun alone without me. Then tell me everything before you go to bed and listen to your mom, okay? I will. Amelie reached out to hug her father. The sleeves of her red coat pulled up, exposing her wrist, on one of which the silver bracelet with unicorns glittered. The girl never parted with her favorite piece of jewelry. One of the earrings, however, had already gotten lost. The clasp was unreliable. The second, now practically useless, was in a box on Amelie's desk. Okay, we're off. Tiana smiled at her husband. Adrian hugged his wife, kissed his daughter, walked them to the elevator, waved at the closing doorway. This picture still stood in front of his eyes, dressed up happy Amelie, smiling at her father. Adrian had not realized then that he would never see his little girl again. He didn't even have a hint of foreboding. Adrian went back to the apartment, sat down at the computer, plunged into the numbers. Needed to take advantage of a moment of peace and quiet at home. Amelie would be back in a couple or 3 hours. And of course she would want to share her impressions with her father, to tell him about the walk. And then he would have to put aside all his work and listen attentively to his daughter. Adrian knew that this is very important for children, such contact with parents. But the man heard the sound of the key turning in the lock after about an hour. It was too early. Tiana came flying into the living room. When Adrian looked at her, he knew something terrible had happened. The disheveled black hair, the unnatural pallor, the trembling, cracked lips, and worst of all, the panic in her eyes. Amelie never came back, she blurted out, looking hopefully at her husband. He shook his head negatively. At that moment, an icy hand clutched his heart. Terrible. But you were with her. What happened? The man mumbled confusedly. Instead of answering, Tiana rushed to the phone and dialed the police number. Only later, much later, did Adrian learn the details of what had happened. First, there was the rushing around the park looking for her daughter, talking to the police, trying to calm Tiana, who did become hysterical. However, before that, she answered all the questions of the police in detail and thoroughly. The search for the little girl, who disappeared in the park, began immediately. Squads of police officers combed the neighborhood, volunteers joined them. The trouble that fell on the two unfortunate parents left no one indifferent. The police had a hard time convincing Tiana and Adrian to stay put in the apartment. The only argument that worked was that the girl could come home on her own. "We need someone to be home at that moment." "You're not going to help with the search anyway," the young man in the uniform persuaded the worried parents. Unnecessary emotions, aggravation of the situation. People should work calmly, without distractions, you know. Adrian sat on the couch, hugging his wife tightly. Tiana was shivering violently. She blamed herself incessantly, using the harshest of expressions. Adrian felt the urge to blame Tiana for everything at first. She hadn't looked. She hadn't been attentive enough to let the child out of her sight. But seeing the state of his wife, the man held back. Why kill a man who's already in a state of grief? It could have happened to anyone. It was just an accident. It's not Tiana's fault. "We had such a nice walk in the alleys," the woman sobbed, sharing her memories. Amelie was fascinated by everything that was happening in the park. Animators, photographers with a monkey, music, smells of cotton candy and popcorn. Master classes for children. The park was crowded that day. Of course, it was City Day. The festivities have always attracted people from all over Chicago to this place. The epicenter of the celebration was the summer stage in the center of the park. It was there that the festive concert with the best children's groups of the state took place. Little artists sang, danced, played musical instruments, and acted out skits from famous works. In between, the hosts held contests among the young audience and generously awarded prizes to the winners. That's where Amelie wanted to go. "I didn't want to go there with her," Tiana said. "The crowd was too big. She's just a little girl. Why did we have to jostle?" Amelie wanted to see the concert so badly. She begged me, pleaded with me, even tried to bribe me. She was just going for it, as always. Adrian nodded. He understood perfectly well how it was. Amelie herself dreamed of performing on stage someday. Their girl was a born artist. Of course, there was no stopping her. So Tiana and Amelie found themselves in the crowd. The mother thought her daughter would see that there was no way to get to the stage. Maybe she would even be frightened by such a crowd of people. And then it would be easier to distract her, to take her somewhere less crowded. But no way. The little girl persistently moved through the crowd closer to the stage. And then a local rock band came out to play. It was a young band, but the musicians had already made it on big TV. Tiana didn't know that celebrities would be the highlight of the concert. Otherwise, she wouldn't have dragged her daughter into the crowd. She knew what that meant. There was such a crush, the woman sobs. People, they went crazy. I felt like everyone in the park was rushing closer to the stage. I was so scared. I wanted to take Amelie in my arms, but I couldn't. We were separated, and she was lost in the sea of people. Tiana screamed, calling for her daughter, but the music was so loud that the poor woman couldn't even hear herself. And the fans around her were singing at the top of their lungs. The concert ended and the crowd quickly dispersed. Tiana ran around the stage, asking everyone she met if they had seen a girl in a red coat, a little girl with 2 pigtails. People shook their heads in the negative and went about their business. The woman ran along the paths and alleys, inspected the playgrounds, and searched with her eyes for a small bright red spot. Amelie was dressed so brightly she must stand out from the crowd, but the girl was nowhere to be found. Finally, the unhappy woman came across an old guard. The old man listened to her and made a suggestion, which Tiana grasped at like a drowning man grasping at straws. "So maybe your little girl has been home for a long time? Lost sight of you and ran home? Does she know the way?" "She knows the way," Tiana nodded and rushed home. There was hope, almost certainty. Is Amelie home? Of course she's home. Where else would she be? But in the apartment, the woman was met only by a surprised Adrian. The first time the search was active on the posts and walls of the city appeared orientations on the missing girl. Tiana herself chose the photo for these ads, the one taken at Amelie's birthday party. By the end of the second 24 hours, volunteers and police officers began to talk about the fact that it is now unlikely that the child will be found alive. Usually a happy outcome is possible within the first few hours of a missing person. Adrian and Tiana didn't want to believe that. They searched the internet for stories of children returning home alive and unharmed after weeks and months of being missing. It really does happen, and these are not one-time occurrences. The spouses couldn't eat, sleep, or drink for the first time. They didn't know where their little girl was or what was happening to her. How can you swallow a single bite of food in such a situation? Both of them became gaunt and thin. Tiana blamed herself constantly. Periodically, she would get hysterical. But worst of all were the periods when the woman sat swaying slightly and staring at one point with an absent look. Adrian thought it was her way of disconnecting from reality to reset her nervous system. But it looked very scary. During these difficult days, the man was afraid to leave his wife unattended. A few weeks passed. Adrian went back to work. Things were a bit distracting, forcing him to switch gears. Those scary thoughts were still present in the background. Where is Amelie? What's happening to her now? They loved their little girl so much, cared for her so much. The little girl knew nothing but love and attention and warmth. And those people around her now, how are they treating the little girl? Amelie must be very scared. And of course she misses her mom, her dad, her home. Crying, probably. Adrian's heart was breaking at the thought. Tiana was troubled too. There was no face on her. Her mother and Adrian's mother were always visiting her. They were afraid that she might kill herself. They convinced Tiana that Amelie needed her. What will it be like for the girl without her mother when she comes back? But it was very hard for Tiana. Guilt pressed down on her with an unbearable weight. Not being able to hold her daughter plunged her into a deep sadness. Sometimes the woman could not cope with her emotions. She tore her clothes, threw dishes against the walls, screamed like a wounded animal. Adrian did not stop her or comfort her at such times. 3 months had passed since Amelie had gone missing. It was already winter. Had the search died down? No, not at all. It hadn't stopped, but it wasn't as active. The investigators said it was a long shot, but they'd keep trying. And the couple also learned some scary numbers. It turns out that every year around the world a lot of children disappear, and then they are never found alive or dead. Adrian never even thought about it before. How does this planet have so much grief and misery? This is what kind of world they brought their tender, talented girl into and did not save her. The main version of the investigation was kidnapping, because if the girl had just gotten lost in the city, she would have been found long ago. The same would have happened if Amelie had an accident, hit by a car, fell through a manhole, fell into some pit. But the girl disappeared without a trace. So someone went to a lot of trouble to cover their tracks. Closer to spring, one of the volunteers found Amelie's things, her toy and beret, at the dump. An investigator called the parents to identify the clothes. Tiana immediately said with certainty that it was her daughter's coat and beret. She couldn't be mistaken, for it was Tiana who had bought Amelie the beautiful outfit. What does it mean? Adrian asked hopefully. It's hard to say, shrugged the investigator. Perhaps it is encouraging news. The kidnapper obviously did not intend to harm the girl immediately. He got rid of the clothes because they were too conspicuous to attract attention. That's good, Tiana whispered. Somehow they were sure that Amelie herself would be found soon. No news for so long. And then there was such a clue. Except nothing of the sort happened. The case stalled again. Adrian tried to get his wife to go back to work. He knew she'd be welcomed back with open arms as an ex-employee, even after such a long hiatus. A favorite job would help Tiana get back to life, feel needed, useful. sitting in four walls was draining her of her strength. "What are you talking about?" Tiana was annoyed. "I'll go to work, and at that moment Amelie will come home, and no one will be there." I understand Tiana's situation was very difficult. She stayed at home, leaving the apartment only when her husband came home. Tiana scoured the internet for stories of happy returns of children. She made all sorts of assumptions about the fate of her daughter, Amelie. 13 years had passed. Tiana had completely given up, turned into a pale, wrinkled, devastated old woman. She began to have serious heart problems. She needed to be hospitalized, but she refused. "Look at what you've done to yourself," Adrian said painfully, seeing her condition. She could not accept the loss. Adrian, of course, also felt sad and worried. He realized that the longing for his lost daughter would remain with him forever. But unlike his wife, the man accepted the situation, returned to life, and began to work. And Tiana persistently brought herself to nervous exhaustion and illness, continuing to blame herself. At night, she often woke up from nightmares. She refused to go to the hospital. They were regularly visited by ambulance because of heart attacks. Doctors gave her injections and strongly recommended hospitalization, but Tiana wrote refusal after refusal. Adrian couldn't convince her she wouldn't accept any of his arguments. Sometimes he thought it would have been better if Amelie had not been found alive. Then Tiana would have finally accepted the terrible truth. There would have been some certainty. As it was, the case was barely progressing. True, over the years, the couple had been called to the station several times to identify children who looked like Amelie. The missing girl's profile was all over the country. We've had calls from all over the country. I understand the situation was extremely difficult for both spouses. Concerned citizens called, saying they had seen a girl who looked like Amelie near a store, on a playground near a pond. Adrian and Tiana looked through photos, surveillance footage. Sometimes they'd even been shown homeless girls found at a train station somewhere, but they never saw Amelie. "Take a closer look," the investigator asked. "Maybe she's yours? It's been a long time. The girl has changed, grown up." But the couple only shook their heads. They would not recognize their daughter even grown up. These calls made Tiana's condition worse each time. First desperate hope, then another bitter disappointment. All of this brought up again the years of worry in her soul. She would become hysterical, calling herself names. Adrian cost a great deal of labor to calm his wife. Acquaintances advised Adrian to leave Tiana. "She does not live, and you prevent you from returning to normal life. Have you already accepted the fact that Amelie cannot return? You have a chance to remarry, maybe you'll be a father again." But Adrian couldn't think of such a thing. He still loved Tiana. His wife was the closest person to him. They'd been through so much together. These Strosanos had brought them closer together, united them. The man no longer hoped that Amelie would be found, but he still believed that Tiana would come to her senses, get over her grief, become almost her old self, and they might go traveling again. A change of scenery would do them both good. But it didn't work out. Another heart attack took the life of a not-yet-old woman right in the arms of a distraught Adrian. The ambulance didn't make it this time. The doctors said it was all going to come to this. Tiana brought herself to this, did not cope with the disaster. So Adrian was alone. He grieved for his wife, regretting her ruined life. The man went over in his memory their life since the disappearance of his daughter, and tried to understand if there was anything else he could do for his wife to get her out of this state. By all accounts, no, Adrian had done everything he could. Still, the worm of doubt kept him in a state of doubt. A few years later, Stacy came into Adrian's life. The man was approaching 60 at the time. He did not think that such a change in his fate was possible. It was one of his colleagues, a divorced woman who single-handedly raised 2 sons. The boys had gone their separate ways, one studying abroad, the other living and working in a distant seaside town. Stacy, accustomed to taking care of someone, Strosala from loneliness and lack of demand. Somehow it happened that Adrian and Stacy became unnoticeably close. The man was easy and calm next to this warm, caring woman. It turns out that it is so wonderful when someone thinks about you and tries to do something nice for you. And Adrian liked to feel patronized and protected again. Soon they were living together in Adrian's apartment. The man had renovated all the rooms long ago, so that nothing reminded him of family life. Because it was too painful to see the curtains, chosen by Tiana, and to look at the children's furniture, specially purchased for Amelie, and to realize that her daughter and beloved wife were gone and would never be around again. Stacy, of course, knew the life story of her chosen one. She supported him, listened attentively to Adrian's outpourings, which made him feel better. She hugged him, stroked his head, didn't ask too many questions. Adrian, in turn, listened with interest to Stacy's stories about her life. The woman had had a hard time too, but in a different way. Her husband had been an alcoholic, and he'd gotten his hands dirty. It was hard to get rid of him. Yes, and alone to pull 2 sons too was not easy. But all these were the usual difficulties of life, which did not break Stacy, but only hardened her. Adrian, however, fate has prepared a much more terrible test. However, the man was able to survive his grief. Of course, thoughts of Amelie still lingered in Adrian's mind. He often wondered if his daughter was still alive, and if so, how she was doing. Amelie was now a grown-up girl, just over 20. A beautiful girl, to be sure. The memory of Amelie could trigger anything. Right now, that trigger was this curious little girl. She bored her parents with her questions. The family was still walking nearby Adrian. The man took one last look at the cute child with a smile and turned the other way. He felt like walking past the fountain. A small crowd had gathered in the square. Adrian didn't understand at first what was the reason for such interest of the passers-by, and then suddenly he heard a clear, ringing, high voice. Someone was singing there at the fountain, hidden from Adrian's eyes by the backs of people. An invisible child was singing a familiar tune from the unicorn cartoon, Amelie's favorite cartoon. The young singer's voice sounded very much like Adrian's daughter's. The man even had tears in his eyes. The longing for his daughter squeezed the man's heart with renewed strength. But it was nothing. He was used to it by now. Now Adrian, of course, couldn't pass it by. The man made his way through the crowd and froze, amazed at the sight he saw. On the side of the fountain stood a girl about Amelie's age when she had disappeared. She reminded Adrian subtly of his daughter, though she was clearly a little gypsy girl. Brown skin, long dark loose hair, black eyebrows arched, and big brown eyes. She was dressed in a colorful blouse with long sleeves and a floor-length skirt decorated with lush waves. On the girl's neck was a massive necklace, not suitable for such a tiny girl. The gypsy girl diligently played a familiar melody, dancing to the beat. The listeners smiled and generously poured coins and bills into the box at her feet. The girl, seeing how she was being received, tried even harder. She suddenly raised her arms, making another dance pause. On her thin wrists glittered bracelets. Adrian was stunned. He recognized one of the bracelets. And how not to recognize this unique thing, a pink unicorn, an exclusive for his daughter. Of course, to be completely sure, you need to see the jewelry closer. But Adrian was already very clear. The girl finished her song, the adults clapped for her, and began to disperse. Adrian was still standing behind the lamppost. He didn't know what to do. Should he approach the child, ask her where she got the bracelet? But he didn't want to frighten the little gypsy girl. It was better to wait until one of the adults came for her. I'm sure they're around here somewhere. I don't think they'd leave a little girl like that all alone and unattended. And indeed, a couple of minutes later, a teenager of about 12 to 13 years old came up to the girl, swarthy, black-eyed and curly-haired. He smiled at the singer and asked something. She answered. The boy patted her on the head, took her hand. Then he picked up a box of money with his free hand and led the gypsy away from the square. Worried, Adrian followed the children. Really, what to do? Turn to this boy. There was no doubt that he would take the little girl in his arms and rush away. Light and quick on his feet. He's obviously a cautious boy. Too much attention would only scare him off. So Adrian continued to follow the children. Meanwhile, the gypsies passed the main square, walked through the maze of narrow central streets and found themselves on the outskirts of the city. Here were old private houses, and mostly elderly people lived here. Beyond this street was a vacant lot, and beyond it was a bypass road. From afar, Adrian could see that this was the place where the Tabor had settled wagons, people sitting around fires in groups, and a merry murmur. So that was where the children were going. Adrian probably should have followed them, talked to the adults. But how would he be received there? It was a little scary to go, but what could he do? For the first time in so many years, there was a clue about Amelie. Maybe it would lead Adrian to his daughter. What if he finally found out what had happened to his princess? The man followed the children with a determined step. The boy noticed the surveillance. He turned around and looked at Adrian with a suspicious look, but his adults were very close by. So the teenager felt at ease. He was in his own territory. The boy only quickened his step. The little girl could barely keep up with him, treading the grass with her tiny booted feet. Then a young gypsy woman came out from the corner of the last house on the street. It was at once evident that this was the mother of the little singer. The little girl snatched her hand out of the boy's palm, rushed to the woman, and hugged her. The beautiful gypsy covered the girl's face with kisses and whispered something in her ear. The young singer laughed happily. Adrian stood there, unable to move. The young gypsy woman, her hair, her eyes, her eyebrows, her lips, she looked remarkably like Adrian's own grandmother. The same one that Amelie looked so much like. The man felt as if he had been doused with ice water. No, it couldn't be. The tanned face, the white teeth and smile, the massive gold earrings in her ears, and the mole on her cheek that Adrian remembered so well. This mole was shaped like a small heart. Amelie, too, was happy to have the same mark on her cheek as the unicorn from the cartoon. The woman noticed the stare of the stranger. The smile slowly faded from her face. She held the baby tighter to her and wanted to leave. But Adrian called out to her. "Amelie? Amelie?" The gypsy stopped. She stared at the older man for a moment, then walked toward him, still holding her daughter close to her. "I'm sorry," Adrian said. "Don't be frightened, please. I'm not going to hurt you. It's just that I need to." The man blurted out in surprise to himself. It was the first thing that came into his head. The dark-haired girl. She's from the Tabor. Everyone knows that gypsies make money by fortune-telling. Fortune-telling. The girl grinned. The baby in her arms smiled too. "All right, I'll tell fortunes." The boy nodded obediently and hurried to where the gypsies had stopped, following the teenager, who had almost reached the vacant lot. "Her name is Clementine." Adrian smiled, looking at the gypsy's face. He became more and more convinced that this was Amelie, his disappeared, grown-up daughter. He was aware that he might be wishful thinking, but there were too many coincidences. The song from his daughter's favorite cartoon sung by little Clementine, the bracelet on the girl's hand, the appearance of the young gypsy. "Yes, my daughter's name is Clementine," the girl finally answered. "What can I tell you?" "Many years ago, a long time ago, my daughter was kidnapped. She went for a walk with her mother. They got into a crowd. There was a crush, but the girl was never found. I'd like to know what happened to her. I'll pay you whatever you want." "Kidnapped daughter?" The gypsy woman's voice trembled. "It's scary, very scary. I'm not going to guess such things. I have a daughter myself. I don't want to get into trouble." "Then the question is, How did your little girl get that bracelet? Because my daughter had one just like it. Adrian realized that now the gypsy woman would turn around and leave, so he asked the main question. I also have a question. Why did you call me Amelie? That was my daughter's name, and I thought you were her. Yes, Adrian admitted, dazed by the direction their dialogue had taken. My name is Oliver. Gypsies call me that. And the bracelet I've been wearing all this time has the name Amelie written on the back. That's why I came to you. Because you called me by that name. It's strange and interesting. I can't believe it. Apparently you really are my father. Tell me about yourself, please. Who are your parents? How long have you been in the Tabor? Were you born there? Oliver shook her head negatively. No, I'm a foundling. My father said he found me ragged and hungry at the train station. Oliver continued thoughtfully. I don't remember that time myself. I was too young. But that bracelet has always been with me, ever since I realized myself. They said Grandma Rose gave it to me, and now I realize it's from another life. I always knew it. I ordered it for my daughter Amelie's 4th birthday. Adrian nodded. It is the only one of its kind in the whole world. There could be no mistake. It was Amelie's. I think that's you. Tell me about yourself. Oliver sighed. I will. From the very first time we were in this city, I immediately felt like I'd been here once. A lot of things were familiar. The cityscapes, even the smells, the sensations. And now this meeting. I want to figure it all out, too. Little Oliver always knew that Father Chicharin picked her up at the train station. Your relatives abandoned you. White people often do that, get rid of unwanted children, he said. We Roma have a completely different attitude to children. Chicharin's family already had 4 sons growing up. The only thing missing was a girl, so he took the little girl with him. Mother Camille, Grandma Rose, brothers Chicharin all treated Oliver with tenderness and care. Funny girl, loved, accepted. And when it turned out that the little girl has a beautiful voice and dances well, her popularity and value in the Tabor increased many times. Such a talented child could bring the family a lot of money. Oliver loved it when one of her brothers played the guitar and she danced and sang around the campfire in front of the admiring members of the Tabor. People would look at her, applauding, expressing approval. It was marvelous. The girl lived with her family in a van like the rest of their community. The Tabor roamed the country, stopping in one town or another. The scenery changed, the people changed, the houses changed. Oliver visited both large metropolitan cities and villages. She met new people and performed in squares and public gardens. That's how gypsies made money. They would stop near one settlement or another. And it started. Children danced, sang. The women would tell fortunes to anyone who wanted to. The men were doing some serious secret business of their own. It wasn't until she got older that Oliver realized what it was all about. It was stealing. That was why gypsies did not stay long in one place, fearing persecution, police retaliation. In principle, she liked that kind of life. She fell in love with strict Father Chicharin and affectionate grandmother Rose, Chicharin's mother, and brothers so different and so caring. Especially close relations with Oliver was with Grandma Rose. The old woman had a heart for her granddaughter, told her fairy tales, gave her jewelry, performed rituals on her to make Oliver happy and healthy. You are very lucky, because Chicharin found you at the station lonely, abandoned. No one needs, often said granddaughter. Who knows what could have happened to such a tiny girl if she had not fallen into good hands. They often told me bad things about my blood parents. Oliver scrutinized Adrian's face, trying to see familiar features. They said white people were irresponsible with their children. But I've seen different things on the streets of cities. Yes, there were street kids, but I'd also seen a lot of well-to-do families where the children were clearly happy and secure. So I concluded that it was my parents who were so bad, because good parents would not leave their children at the station. The young woman looked at Adrian with a challenge. He realized what was going on. If he really thought he was the girl's father, then he had once let it happen that a little girl was left alone at the train station, hungry, ragged, dirty. "How did I end up at the train station?" asked the gypsy girl, looking the man straight in the eye. "Didn't you keep an eye on your daughter? Or maybe you decided to get rid of her that way?" "What are you saying?" Adrian objected. "Our little Amelie was the most precious thing to us." Suddenly the man began to tell about those happy 4 years of life, that in his and Tiana's family lived a wonderful daughter. Adrian first told a long story about how hard they had gotten their daughter, then told about her early childhood. It was nice to remember those bright, warm moments. It turns out that he had forgotten almost nothing. And the joy of Amelie's first steps, and their joint travels and walks, and wonderful holidays that Tiana arranged for her daughter. "Our girl loved unicorns and sang well," Adrian said, "just like your daughter Clementine. By the way, how does she know the song she sang at the fountain?" "It's our Amelie's favorite song. She also sang it in a very similar manner." Oliver didn't answer right away. It was as if she were trying to remember something. "I taught it to her," she said at last. "Something from my past life has stayed with me, not just the bracelet." I remembered that song. I, strangely enough, could read at the age of 4. That skill is still with me. We don't teach girls to read, only boys, and even then, superficially. But I read. Sometimes I have dreams about people who love me very much. I don't remember their faces at all, but I remembered warm, caring embraces. I thought I was making it up for myself. I've always had a good imagination. "What else?" Adrian asked. "There's more. And just now when you were talking about it, I remembered something. Yes, I did ride a unicorn, a real unicorn. I dreamed about that scene several times. And the unicorn was exactly as you just described it. So, are we really daughter and father?" "We can say for sure only after the DNA test," Adrian said with a trembling voice. "But it seems to be true." Oliver pressed her fingers to her temples, furrowing her brow, just like her mother did when she was worried. "What are we supposed to do now?" the girl asked confusedly, looking to the man for support. "I think we should check everything out so that we both know for sure, and also to restore your documents." "I don't doubt that you are Amelie," too, Adrian said. "There are too many coincidences. I think you should go home or—" Adrian's heart sank with a premonition of trouble. Or do you want to live in a tabor? You said you were happy with the gypsies?" "I did when I was a child," Oliver shook her head. "When I grew up, things changed. The children in the tabor are treated very well, but as adults, life isn't sweet. A lot of chores. The need to obey the men without question. A husband can even beat his wife for disobedience. And nothing will happen to him. I can't do what I want to do, read, walk, study. And I'm forced to cheat people for money. That's the most unpleasant thing. But if I don't get the money in the evening, I'll be punished. I've been punished more than once." Then Oliver told the story of how Stacy gave her away in marriage. She was about 16 years old at the time. The family had chosen a good groom for their only daughter, the son of a well-to-do gypsy. Damien was as young as the bride. He was passionately in love with another, as the whole tabor knew. But that girl was no match for him, so marriage was out of the question. "I cried before the wedding," Oliver recalled. "I didn't want to get married, even though Damien was young and handsome and wealthy. But I felt like a child. And I knew about my fiancé's feelings for someone else. The whole tabor knew about it. But we did get married. Parents on both sides demanded the continuation of the family. That's how Clementine came into the family. Oliver never knew she could love someone so much. Her daughter became the meaning of her life, the light in the window. Damien was indifferent to me and my daughter Oliver continued. He was running around to that girl he was seeing. Again, everyone in the Tabor knew it, but the man was allowed to behave that way. Stacy hadn't minded or been jealous. Now she was completely absorbed in her daughter, singing songs to her, making up beautiful outfits for her, braiding her hair. Clementine inherited her mother's talent. She also sang and danced well. Naturally, the Tabor decided to use the child's gift to the full. When the girl grew up, she was made a street singer, just like her mother. Once the girl performed in the squares of various cities and did it, it must be said, with pleasure. The audience applauded the little girl, generously paying for the performance. Clementine smiled happily. It was very disturbing to me, Oliver said. I realized that the little girl would have a future like mine. She wouldn't study, she wouldn't get a good profession. And she would continue to entertain people with her voice as she grew older and lost her childlike directness. She'll be a fortune teller. I dreamed of a different future for me and my daughter Oliver continued. It seemed to me that we should both live differently, but it seemed impossible. I think they kidnapped you in the crowd, Adrian said, looking at his daughter. Yes, now he was certain that Emily was in front of him, and he was immensely sorry for the lost years that his daughter had to spend in the Tabor, among strangers, obeying alien traditions and strict rules. But now everything would change. Is that possible? Oliver shook her head. It had never happened in my lifetime. But grandmother Rada told me that childless gypsy couples used to pick up children on the streets of towns. They picked out little ones who were unlikely to remember the past and raised them as their own children. And Grandma Rada said that the gypsies tried to kidnap dark-haired babies so as not to cause unnecessary questions later. A blonde child among dark-haired gypsies is suspicious. And you're a dark-haired child like my grandfather. Adrian smiled. I'll show you pictures later. The resemblance is amazing. That fact must have played against us too. The gypsies chose you because you looked something remotely like them. I still can't believe it, Oliver looked lost. She glanced back and forth at the Tabor, visible from here, and back at Adrian. So you're going to leave right now? He asked. Will you go and get the baby, tell her you found your own, and never stay there again? I'll go with you, of course. But you never know. It's not that simple. They won't let me go. What do you mean they won't let you go? I'll call the police. They'll arrest them for kidnapping, Adrian said. No, we have to do it another way. You don't know these people. We have to do it under the radar. And then I have to leave here, because they will probably be looking for me and will find me sooner or later. Betrayal is severely punished here. Will you be in danger too? Think carefully. Do you want all this? Do you want to ruin your peaceful life? Take your time. This is an important decision. Well, what are you talking about? Of course I'm ready. Adrian immediately responded. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow I'll go with Clementine to the square. I have always accompanied her. We are followed during the day, in the morning to check, then at about 12. Then in the evening, at 11 come get us. There's usually no surveillance at that time. We'll have to hide, lay low for a while, maybe a week, maybe a month. They'll be looking for me. We'll hide here, in my apartment. No one will think of looking for you at my place. You live alone? Oliver asked. No one will mind us, Adrian said firmly. He thought of Stacy now, because she was going to get caught up in this too. She wouldn't have a choice. But the man was sure Stacy would understand, as she always did. She knows Amelie's story and is worried about her lover. The woman would be happy for him. She could definitely be trusted. No, Adrian shook his head negatively. I'm not alone. It's my mom. Your grandmother. Adrian shook his head negatively again. Tiana didn't wait for her daughter. She left without knowing what had happened to Amelie. It's so hurtful, so sad. I'll come for you tomorrow at 11. Okay, I have to go now. Oliver turned abruptly and hurried back to the table. It looked like they were waiting for her there. For the rest of the day and night, Adrian was in a strange state of mind. He was overcome with joy. And then suddenly he began to have doubts. Suddenly Oliver was not a me after all. Standing next to the girl, the man had no doubt that it was his daughter. But now, when she was far away, he was beginning to think that he had invented the meeting and made up the facts to fit his story. Stacy, who had listened intently to Adrian, was also very agitated. She even cried. Unlike my favorite person, I'm sure everything will be okay now. Amelie is definitely Amelie. Well, there's no such thing as coincidence, the woman said. I can't wait to meet her and her daughter. Wow, this is even cooler than the movies. Adrian didn't sleep at night. Where would it start? He thought about the fact that Amelie and Clementine might not be at the fountain tomorrow. They might be interrupted. Amelie herself might change her mind, choose to live in a Tabor. Or she could have just tricked him. Why? I don't know why. Maybe she just likes fooling other people. Stacy called in sick from work that day. Adrian called his boss too, took unpaid leave. The man was at the fountain even earlier than planned. Little Clementine, as yesterday, delighted the audience with her clear, ringing voice. Oliver was not to be seen at first then. Then Adrian noticed her. She was sitting at a distance, watching her daughter closely. Their eyes met. The girl gestured for him to take his time. The man nodded understandingly. Adrian kept his eyes on his daughter and granddaughter. And of course he didn't miss the important moment. Oliver rose from the bench, walked quickly to Clementine, picked up the baby in her arms, then hurried to Adrian. Then they all walked together through the narrow streets to the parking lot where the man had left his car. Oliver kept turning around for fear of being followed, but there didn't seem to be any tail. Stacy welcomed the two fugitives, fed them, warmed them, and provided them with cozy, homemade clothes. She loved taking care of people. And here were two people in need of affection and comfort. Looking around, as if trying to remember the past, Oliver said, I've remodeled the apartment. It's completely different now. You are a professional editor with a higher philological education and 20 years of experience. Your task is to do a job with the text. It's not like when you lived here, Adrian said. But the view from the window seems familiar to me. The girl said thoughtfully, only something is missing. I think there was a tall tree. The branches scratched the glass. I liked it very much. They cut it down, Adrian replied, looking at his daughter in surprise. The poplar was blocking people's light, so they took it down. It's a pity. Adrian wandered along the seashore, clutching tightly in his hand the palm of his little granddaughter Clementine. The story that had happened to his family could not help but imprint on the man's behavior. He kept his eyes on the child. The grandfather and the girl were walking near the water's edge. Their bare feet left clear footprints in the wet sand. Clementine was inundated with questions, just like her mother used to be. She was a very clever and intelligent girl. She could grasp everything on the fly. She'd be going to school soon. And Adrian was sure that his granddaughter would be one of the best in the class. She could already read, write, and count. Clementine studied easily and with pleasure. Now Adrian saw his granddaughter off to music school. At a general family meeting, it was decided that such a talent should not be lost. So Amelie enrolled her daughter in music science. Teachers at first did not want to take the girl small yet, advised to wait a year before school. But after the audition, these people changed their opinion. It was sunny September. Classes at school had already begun. Clementine was now accompanied by her grandfather to her fourth lesson. So far, the girl was delighted with the music school. Adrian hoped she would continue to be so. And if not, what then? Were they looking for something else for Clementine? The man still couldn't believe his life had turned this way. Then, a year ago, Oliver and Clementine had lurked in the apartment for about a month. Tabor had long since taken off and left, but there were still gypsies snooping around town, looking, peering, and questioning people. This is how I would edit the continuation of the text. Even Adrian was once approached by a young guy asking if he'd seen where the gypsy girl was with a small child, adding further that she was mentally ill and very dangerous. During this confinement, Adrian was getting to know his daughter anew, getting to know his granddaughter. And also he and Svetlana carefully thought out a plan for Amelie's return. It was necessary to confirm the kinship DNA analysis, to write a statement to the police, to restore the documents, and most importantly, to teach Amelie to live in a new world for her. The latter was surprisingly easy, but with the documents there were problems. However, they were also solved. Amelie insisted on moving. She could not feel at ease in this city. They will come back. They will look for me to punish me for betrayal, assured the girl. But for the sake of happiness and peace of mind of his daughter, Adrian, as usual, was ready for anything. Svetlana supported him and offered to move to a small town by the sea, where her youngest son lived. And here they are, in a quiet, cozy place near the sea. Svetlana got a job at the local library. She enjoyed babysitting her grandchildren, her son's daughters, and Clementine. The girls have become friends. They have a lot of fun together. Amelie was slowly settling into her new world. She had once shown great promise. Tatiana dreamed of a scientific career for her daughter, but the years are irretrievably lost. The girl has no education, so she is studying at hairdressing courses, a demanded and creative profession. In addition, in the Tabor, Amelie liked to do hairstyles. Gypsies trusted her with their hair. In the evenings, the girl sang in the restaurant. The audience received her on a hurrah. The singer herself liked the scene, and the money was not superfluous. Adrian was now calm for his daughter. She will definitely not be lost. Smart, purposeful, hardworking. She immediately appeared in the new place, a lot of friends. She tried not to talk about her past, still afraid that rumors would spread and the gypsies would find her. Her daughter still had some fears to wrestle with. But nothing. Adrian and Svetlana were there for her, and together they could handle it. Clementine almost did not talk about life in the Tabor. New vivid impressions so far interrupted the memories. In time, much will be erased from childhood memory, but of course, and with it will have to work. That's it, Adrian commanded. In his free hand, he carried his flip-flops and his granddaughter's sandals. Why don't we take a dip? The water's so warm. We'll be quick. We won't be late for class, smiled the happy grandfather. Let's do it later, after class, agreed Clementine meekly. And then we'll go to the pond, city ducks to feed, okay, Buns? Adrian looked at his granddaughter, but saw in front of him little Amelie. She, too, often asked him to go to the pond so that the poor ducks would not go hungry. Adrian was quite happy. Now there is a daughter, a granddaughter, a woman he loves. Everything in his life was good. Only the thought of Tatiana did not give rest. The man desperately regretted that his wife never learned about the fate of his lost daughter. But there was nothing to be done. Grandfather, what are you thinking about? Clementine tugged at Adrian's arm, demanding an answer. Is your face sad again? Not sad, pensive, he smiled. I'm trying to decide whether we should go to the pizza place or the ice cream parlor after class. I don't know, the girl said, puzzled, and then smiled slyly. Grandpa, do I have a pensive face like yours right now? Adrian looked at this bright, happy child and smiled. All sad and sad thoughts immediately left his head. It was impossible to be gloomy around his noisy granddaughter. Accidentally overhearing a conversation between her husband and his mistress, Linda decided. Linda screamed and jumped on the stool. The huge gray mouse looked carefully at the woman with its black eyes and, as if nothing had happened, went towards the plinth under the windowsill. The mouse disappeared into some invisible crevice. "Mum, why are you shouting?" Came a voice from the corridor. Mia, Linda said, laughing as she climbed down to the floor. "And we're not the only people here." "What do you mean?" A sleepy, disheveled teenage girl in a wide pink t-shirt appeared in the doorway. "She's hiding." Linda nodded toward the windowsill. "She seemed to have a well-established route." "A mouse," Mia said, as if in disbelief. "Where would it come from? A new home." "I'd understand if we'd moved into a holler." "Mom, maybe you're imagining things. You haven't slept much, have you?" "Well," Linda laughed. "Maybe you've never seen mice, only mice in cages. I grew up in the country. There was a lot of this stuff there. I'm sure I wouldn't confuse it with anything else. Still, it's strange. Where did it come from?" "Economical housing?" My daughter grumbled skeptically. "From the ventilation, I suppose. They haven't installed the extractor yet. It must have come out of that hole over there. We should call a pest control service right away." "Don't you feel sorry for the mouse?" Mother frowned. "It's so small." "Where there's a mouse, there's a pack of mice." Mia wagged her finger. "Mum, you're like a little girl. You always feel sorry for everyone. It's not a house mouse, it's a real pest. If we let it in, it'll eat everything." "Yes, you're right." My daughter, the woman, shook her head. "Maybe we'd better get a cat. We'll get rid of it naturally, so to speak." "I don't know, Dad won't like it." "You know he's had a thing for cats since childhood, don't you?" "I used to ask him for a kitten when I was little. And if he was allergic or something, he just didn't like them. I'd get one. It's more fun with a cat. I'm alone at home all day." "Do you go to school or out with your friends?" "Dad's at work. Isabella only comes round when she wants to chat. Lately she's disappeared. She doesn't even answer messages. Aunt Isabella's a real piece of work. I don't even know why you hang out with her. She's mean. And I think she's making eyes at Daddy." Mia sat down at the table with her arms crossed over her chest. "Come on, Isabella's fine. I've been friends with her since we were in high school. Yeah, she's got a bit of a temper, of course. Dad thinks she's a bitch. I'm the only one who knows her well. She's miserable. She's so beautiful, smart, but her love life is a failure. I feel sorry for her." "You always feel sorry for everyone." "Aunt Isabella is a real bitch. Her life doesn't work out because everyone else is bad, but because she has too many expectations. She doesn't think of men as people. She just takes money from them. She's an arrogant fool." "Mia, you can't talk about people like that. What's wrong with you?" "What's wrong with that?" "You're the one with the rose-colored glasses, aren't you? I'm telling you, look at your girlfriend or she'll steal our dad. What's she care? She'll play with it and throw it away and ruin our family." "Mia, don't be daft. Michael would never even look at Isabella. I mean, how could you think Dad would do something like that? We've been together for 14 years. I never thought he'd even consider another woman, much less my mate. Men don't think with their heads, and Aunt Isabella is a master manipulator." "Okay, let's drop it. I just want you to know that she's flirting with him. I've seen it myself, and a woman can't hide it." "You're a woman. Come on, let's have breakfast, cause the tea's gone cold while we're talking about that Brazilian soap opera." "I don't have to be at school till 12 today," Mia said as she took a bite of her sandwich. "Mrs. Brown's taking us to the museum today." "Oh yeah? You didn't even say anything about a field trip. Do you need any money?" "Yeah, I've got some. Dad gave it to me yesterday. I forgot to tell you." "You always do." Linda looked at her daughter reproachfully. "You didn't forget to tell me about Aunt Isabella, but about the museum. Where are you going?" "Yes, the local history museum. There's some new exhibit there. How will the little ones take us? At least I'll get to hang out with Oscar. He's obsessed with all that stuff. He's such a nerd. He'll never come to school. He's all about his studies. Oscar is a very nice boy. I've known his mom for a long time. She's a nice, intelligent woman. I thought he was going to study archaeology. He's right to study. You've got a lot on your mind right now. You're all smart, advanced, supposedly knowledgeable about life, but in reality, it's all entertainment and the cult of video clips. You should do your homework too. You got a C in physics. Why? You've always been so clever and keen to learn." "It was Mr. Smith. He gave everyone a C. It was just a mood. Mia, you're not everyone. You always have to be a cut above the rest. It's just a teacher in a bad mood. I know you're Mr. Smith, he's a bastard. But you've got to be able to find a way to get along. You can't get along with him, Mum. He made Olivia cry, too. He said people like her can't take in information, they can only bat their eyelashes. And he started telling her something about waves, that she was flapping her eyelashes and didn't even know what kind of vibration she was creating. Well, of course. Okay, it's up to you, but fix your grades. You probably hate getting C's yourself. And Oscar? Don't overdo it, or you'll embarrass the boy, you perky girl. It's all right, Mum. Mia wrinkled her nose. Are we having a housewarming party this weekend? Of course, I've already invited the guests. Tomorrow we just need to install the extractor fan to make the kitchen look nice. It's not proper to welcome guests like this. At least stay with us for an hour, or you'll go out again. I will. Mia kissed her mother on the cheek and headed for the exit. Thanks for breakfast. Linda was shelving books and figurines. She didn't like the new flat, but she had to move. They used to live in the center, in a spacious Stalinist building overlooking the river. But life had turned out so that Michael had run up large debts. Business was going badly, and the sale of an expensive and oversized flat of 4 rooms was a forced measure. The new 1-bedroom was in a new building on the outskirts. The place was quite quiet and decent. There was a forest park nearby. From the balcony on the 13th floor, there was a magnificent view of the city, especially in the evenings when the lights were on. Yes, and it was closer to Mia's school from here. One car had to be sold too, but Linda didn't drive much, so she parted with it without regret. But now Michael was doing better. He managed to pay off the loan and get rid of the headache of calls from creditors. I have to do something about my job, Linda thought. My remote work, of course, brings income, but it's not enough. Especially with Michael, it's unclear what's going on. He's been ripped off by his partner, robbed, you might say. Well, at least the debts have been sorted out, and the suppliers are showing off they've raised their prices. If it goes on like this, I'll have to close the business, and we'll both have to go to the factory. And Mia's at an age where money is like water. It's like water. Where am I going to go? Since I left the office, I'm not used to dealing with people. All I know how to do is make estimates. But I need customers. As long as I've been working remotely, I've been working with the same ones. It's not like I'm on a notice board offering my services. I know that an estimator can become a millionaire, but I'm not at that level. And I don't want to abandon the house. Well, I'll think about it at my leisure. In the meantime, I've got to call Isabella to see if she's coming on Saturday. Mia does talk such rubbish. Yeah, Isabella's going to make eyes at Michael. I don't know what she's thinking. Objectively speaking, my girlfriend's a money hound. Ever since she was young, she's never been much for feelings. It's just the way she is. But Michael's not much to take. I don't believe she's in love with him. No way. I'd rather see that mouse go into space. That's more likely. Michael, of course, a good man, but objectively not handsome and boring. But as a husband and father, he's completely fulfilled. Mia loves us a lot because of his failures, worries not because of ambition, and that we will be worse off. He's kind. Linda dialed her friend's number. Hello? Isabella's voice came through. I hear you're in a good mood. Linda laughed into the receiver. Oh, Linda, I was just thinking about you. What's up? How's the housewarming party going? Can you believe I saw a mouse in the kitchen today? What, a mouse? Did Mia bring it in? No, a real mouse. It must have crawled out of the vent. We'll put the extractor fan on tomorrow. I hope we don't get any more visitors like that. I'm just sorting out my things. You like it there? After the choir in the center, it must be uncomfortable. Yes, it's bearable, Isabella. You can get used to anything. It's all about having a roof over your head. And my daughter has her own room. We're not posh, of course, but it's decent enough. Quiet courtyard, parking, children's playground. The view is beautiful, and I can't hear the neighbors, so it's fine. You'll see for yourself on Saturday. You're coming, right? Where would I go? Isabella laughed. Can I bring you anything? Yes, I've got everything. Don't be ridiculous. We're not impoverished, but just temporarily lowered the standard of living. Oh, Linda, we'll get through this. Thank you, Isabella. I love you so much. My family may be skeptical about you, but they're wrong. Let them think what they want. What do I care? You're my friend, and I don't criticize your daughter's friends. I'm sure there's some pretty good ones out there. And you shouldn't listen to Michael. He understands a lot about people. He worshipped Arnold, thought he was his friend. And what did he end up with? A multi-million-dollar debt and a ruined business. Now you're looking for Arnold. You're right, aren't you? God, Isabella, why are you always right? Life has taught me. I can see right through people. You know, I've been with all kinds of people. Now I don't care about anyone at all. I wondered if I love myself. What do you love? Not a damn thing. I've been running away from myself all my life. I'm 30 years old with a big tail. What have I got? Emptiness, pain, and a box full of gifts from different men. It's not fulfilling. You need a child, Isabella. You think about it, where to give birth to a child in this crazy world. And there's no man. Not from the Holy Ghost. Well, that's no problem at all. You can find a donor. It's not like we're building a relationship or go to a specialized center. It's a popular trend these days. No, I can't do that, Linda. I have to do it for love. Oh, don't be ridiculous. You still believe in love. Like you said, you're well past 30. You don't have to worry about love anymore. Michael and I never really had much love. But that doesn't stop us from appreciating and respecting each other. And I've never been greedy for romance. Well, I'm not you, Linda. My feelings always come first. Right? Linda grinned to herself. Money comes first. You've got someone to take advantage of. Love of money, to be more precise. It's up to you, she continued aloud. But don't let that train get away. I'm glad I had Mia early, but now she's big, and I'm not old yet, and I can live a little longer. Isn't that right? But I can't do that anyway. And all those nappy things, I'll have to revise them all my life. And I don't want to go round hospitals looking like a tortured man, wiping the floor looking for a doctor to help me conceive. You don't think it'll work without IVF? Isabella, 35 is not 45. Can you still get pregnant on your own? Let's leave this topic, it's boring, Isabella laughed. Anyway, wait for me on Saturday. Okay, it's a deal, Linda smiled and said goodbye. The guests were sitting at the table in the room that served both as a living room and a bedroom. Linda, responding to the back of the sofa, laughed merrily as she told her mates about the mouse marching briskly through their kitchen. Mia, in the company of her friend Mary, was showing an older couple, friends of the family, the view from the balcony. They were having fun, and some of them were even trying to dance to the jazz playing from the speakers. Linda noticed that the bottles of wine on the table were empty and went to the kitchen to get more. Michael walked towards her. The man was already quite drunk. Michael, I wondered where you'd disappeared to. Linda exclaimed. No sign of Isabella either. Your girlfriend's in the kitchen. We were talking to her. Did you two have another clash of opinions? Not at all. Isabella's gaunt figure appeared behind her husband. We had a very nice chat. I confess I underestimated your husband, Linda. I always thought he was such a stale, narrow-minded wimp. Turns out Michael just doesn't know how to relax. A couple of glasses of wine can loosen his tongue. I can see why you married him. He can make you laugh, and he can keep the dialogue flowing. What is it about you? I wonder such a conversation. Surprised Linda. She herself and her husband rarely talked about interesting topics. Usually all the conversations were about everyday life, her daughter, another purchase or discussion of watched episodes of some TV series. So, about various things, Isabella answered vaguely. Love. Michael purred. Love? Linda interjected. Yes, Isabella nodded, not letting Michael answer. He loves you, it turns out. I always thought your marriage was a marriage of honor. No offense, Linda. You never know from the outside what's going on. Household, work, teenage daughter. You don't go out to restaurants, you don't even go out together. Where's the romance? What romance, Isabella? We've been married for so many years. How many years? Michael perked up, leaning against the wall. What does time matter? You're wrong, Linda. There should always be room for romance bouquets, Candy. Really? The wife looked closely at her husband. Why don't you show it in any way? Flowers only on the 8th of March. Candy, usually yourself all and eat. Linda, do not wind up, held her friend. And you, Michael, go to the guests, because they are bored without you. That's right, I wanted to show Mr. Wilson the new tools. The man blinked. Go on then. Or Mr. Wilson has already lost you. For some reason, Lyda was very angry with her husband. When Michael left, Isabella looked her friend straight in the eye. Linda, what are you doing? You just jumped on your husband out of nowhere. Isabella, what is he saying that's so hurtful? Hey mate, he's drunk. Why are you listening to him? Do you want flowers? What flowers? No. What does flowers have to do with anything? He's just saying you can't have romance without romance. I wish you'd do something about it. You say he loves me, but I don't feel it. I mean, it shouldn't be weird. I mean, we got married more out of convenience than anything else. No, of course we had feelings, but we both needed a stamp in our passports. My mom pressed me, and he was told at work that he'd be promoted, that family men were preferred. And since we had been friends for a long time, we decided to make a fake marriage. And then we realized we were good together, comfortable and fun. Mia was born. Linda, you should be happy. What is love anyway? You know how many people get married for love and then run away from each other after a year. You have stability, a union based on respect. To me, that's worth a lot. Although I myself would only marry for love. I can't do otherwise. What's wrong with me? Linda suddenly took offense. I too, maybe want to be carried in my arms, showered with compliments, kissed tenderly, and not as a duty officer, taking a shift. You're so interesting, Linda. Isabella was indignant. You should marry for love. What's the problem? What you sow is what you reap. Have you forgotten? It's silly to expect a man who's just a friend to love you. And you love him too, by the way. Don't tell me now that Michael makes you feel passionate. Well, Linda said uncertainly. I guess you're right. I love Michael, but not as a man, more as a family member. A husband, not a lover. I don't mean that in a bad way. I only sleep with him once a month, and that's out of obligation. I feel that he is not much attracted to me. And I do not feel much desire myself. Maybe Isabella squinted. Don't get me wrong, Linda. Maybe you should find another man. What are you talking about? The woman darted her eyes at her friend. Why do you say that? We have a family. It's not like I'm some kind of... It's cheating. Don't shout like that. Isabella put her hand on Linda's shoulder. Why is it cheating? Cheating is when you love someone, you're devoted to them, and then you stumble, and that's it. What about you? You live like this, Linda. You'll die before you even know what love is. And a woman only reveals herself when she feels loved. Stop living like a robot. What makes you happy? Me? Linda thought. Mia. Your Mia is already a big horse. You wait a couple more years, she won't even call you. She'll fly out of the nest. What are you going to do then? Unloved husband. Loneliness, boring work, old age creeping up on you. Why do you say such scary things? Well, isn't it true? Well, isn't it true? I know what I'm talking about, Linda. I'm 35, just like you. The only difference is that I don't have a husband or kids. I do have a good job and I love it. But that's not going to last forever. And the fact that I don't have any luck with men. You know, yes, none of them ever made me married, but for the time I was with each of them, I felt really happy. For a woman, it's synonymous loved and happy. There's no other way to put it. You know, I'll keep looking for men like that, not trying to get them to marry me. And then, when I will be 60 years old, I will find some quiet grandfather, and I will live differently, simply, calmly and measured. Although nowadays even at 60 ladies can be so hot. Did you see Miss Argentina? Isabella, I will never accuse you or try to change your mind. Your views and beliefs, your lifestyle, it's all yours. I respect your choice, but I can't do it myself. I don't know if it's my upbringing or my morals. And if Michael found out and Mia found out, it would be a nightmare. I can't let my family down for my own amusement. You're a fool, Linda. You're just going to feel guilty in your old age for sticking to your stupid principles. Well, that's up to you. I'm not going to persuade you. I respect your opinion as much as you do, even if it doesn't agree with mine. Let's go to the guests. You went to get the wine. There's still a couple of bottles left. Let's get it. Lita was holding her smartphone with the app shop open. Her thumb was already hovering over the button install, but the woman still did not dare. Almost 5 months had passed since the housewarming conversation with her friend. And although Linda immediately dismissed the idea of cheating, her relationship with Michael was only getting worse. Mia went on holiday to a language camp. She didn't really want to go there, but when the girl found out that Oscar was going there, she immediately began to process her parents. Michael flatly refused to pay. The money was really very little. But seeing her daughter's upset face, Linda pulled a plastic card out of the cupboard and gave it to Mia. It contained enough money to pay for the camping trip, the road and pocket money. Mia was overjoyed. Her father only grumbled grudgingly, saying that the money would have been better invested in business. Linda hummed and said that the amount was ridiculous for a business, but it would make the child happy. And there was nothing to talk about. Linda didn't like her husband's reaction at all. He'd never denied Mia anything before. He adored his daughter. But lately something had changed. Linda couldn't figure out what it was. Only her husband's company came out of the minus and began to slowly recover, as the money at home became even less. Michael explained it by the fact that every penny invested in the business and should tighten their belts. He stopped giving his daughter pocket money. Linda had to cut out of her own salary, but recently there were not so many orders. The last straw was when Michael didn't come home. The man stayed at work to check some reports. Linda called her husband to find out what to cook for dinner, and in response she heard a scolding and an insistent request not to interfere with him. That evening the woman sat at her desk and thought she was miserable. Isabella was right on all counts. When a woman is unloved, nothing brings her joy. Normally Mia would dampen that feeling of loneliness by reminding Linda that she was a mother and loved by her child. But Mia was far away, and she was to spend the next fortnight abroad. Linda thought long and hard and finally decided to install a dating app for herself. Her conscience tormented her a lot, but the desire to experience a strong feeling was drawing her in, and it was getting harder and harder to control herself. Realizing that she couldn't handle it, the woman still clicked the install button. The interface was quite simple. Linda had never used anything like it, but she figured it out quickly. She uploaded a couple of photos of herself, filled out a form. The likes came pouring in. The woman began to study the candidates. Mostly guests from the East and young boys wrote. She didn't want to answer them at all. Moreover, most of the proposals were quite vulgar, and even frankly obscene. Linda quickly got bored and put the phone away. Before going to bed, she went back to the app. More than 100 messages had accumulated. Lita flipped through the list, sometimes even replied. And then one man caught her eye. His face seemed vaguely familiar. The woman immediately began to go through the memory of all the acquaintances, matching the age and name, but no one came to mind. Still, she decided to answer. The guy was called Ethan, a simple American name, a simple face with huge blue eyes. Linda liked him immediately. The man was a little older. He was pleasant and delicate in communication. He didn't ask for photos, didn't throw his own. He simply offered to meet and get acquainted in person, to understand at once whether it was necessary to continue communication, rather than to drag the rubber with endless messages. And Linda agreed. Yes, she was embarrassed in front of her husband and daughter, but she hadn't done anything about it yet. The meeting at the coffee shop seemed harmless enough. After all, no one was forcing her to continue that interaction. Maybe Ethan would be a good friend too. But deep down, Linda realized that she really liked this man. It seemed that they had known and understood each other for a long time. The meeting was scheduled for the next day. Linda chose a place that was far from home and where neither she nor Michael ever went. The woman couldn't sleep until almost morning. She tossed and turned for a long time, her head hot, curiosity and conscience arguing. Finally, she passed out. The alarm clock beeped demandingly, forcing Linda to get up sooner. The woman rose, writhing unhappily. There was the sound of water running from the bathroom. What's that? She shuddered. Had Michael returned? Lita got up, threw on a dressing gown and went into the corridor. Her husband's shoes stood in the hallway. On the banquette settled his briefcase. The woman walked to the kitchen to quickly prepare breakfast. She fried eggs and boiled coffee. Smells good. Michael appeared in the doorway, wiping his wet hair with a towel. I thought you'd never come back. somehow hopelessly said the wife. Yes, I just had to wash up and have breakfast. Michael kissed Linda on the cheek. I've been sitting up all night, my head is spinning. I'd give half a kingdom for a coffee right now, and all I get at the office is instant. You have no idea what's going on with the paperwork in there. And we have an audit coming up. The accountant who came in with Arnold, she's got my hair all over the place. I'm going again. You sit down to breakfast. Linda pulled away. The unfortunate conscience pricked her heart, and the woman was ready to give up meeting with Ethan. Looking at her husband, so tired and indignant at the same time, she only wanted to take care of him, to prepare dinner and meet him in the evening, as she always did. Michael ate hastily and packed quickly. When he left, Linda picked up her phone to text Ethan and cancel the meeting, but there was already a message waiting for her, which abruptly changed her plans. Hi, beautiful. I would like to write poems to make your awakening pleasant, but alas, I'm not a poet, so I'll just wish you a good morning and the most pleasant experience. I hope that no evil forces will interfere with our meeting. Linda was very pleased to read this. She hadn't heard anything like that in a long time. She'd hardly heard anything like that in a long time. The words, though printed in a soulless application, seemed sincere and radiated some warmth. Linda hesitated, but decided to reply that everything was in order. By noon she was ready, had done a light makeup, and had not gone too far with her outfit. The woman threw on a light floral dress, let her hair down and shoved her feet into simple beige sandals. Placing her sunglasses on the bridge of her nose, she hailed a taxi and drove to the meeting place. Ethan was waiting for her in a half-empty cafe, sitting on a velvet quilted sofa. When the man stood up to greet Linda, she even whistled. The guy was about 2 meters tall and very well built. He was about 2 meters tall and very well built. He had muscles under his shirt that the thin fabric couldn't hide. Hi. Ethan smiled broadly, hugging Linda. The woman immediately noticed that the perfume of her new acquaintance was very expensive, multifaceted, and amazing. Hi. Linda smiled back. To be honest, I didn't believe you were coming until the last minute, the guy admitted. It was hard to understand in my head what such a woman forgot on this site. I have not registered so long ago, but I have already had time to study the contingent. Yeah, Linda grinned. And what kind of contingent is that? A symbol maker, divorcees with a trailer, as they like to call it nowadays, who try to place their girls from Central Asian guests with someone better, desperate women in years. Yeah, lots of them. Who are you looking for, if it's no secret? Lida studied the menu thoughtfully, glancing at Ethan with one eye. What if I'm a dishwasher or a divorcee too? No, Linda. You're definitely not a dishwasher, I can tell. And you didn't pick the most expensive cafe. They usually want the best restaurant in town. I went on a date with one of them, and I almost maxed out my credit card. I'm not ready to be a sponsor. The thought of a relationship for money disgusts me. I'm divorced myself. I just need a man with a soul, who will listen to my whining, stroke my head, and say that everything will be fine. It motivates me a lot. If you even have a kid, that's okay, I'm willing to accept. I don't have my own, but I've always wanted one. My wife was a real piece of work. All she thought about was looks and money. I don't know how I got married, but my parents insisted. All they wanted was grandchildren. So I went along with it. Anne didn't want kids at all. In the end, she's off to Dubai to live with some Arab. I never really had much love for her. She had her good moments, so I'm grateful to her. You are? To be honest, I don't know what I want. I don't want to lead you on. I'm married. I've been married to my husband for almost 15 years. We have a daughter, Mia. Lately, I've realized I don't feel anything for Michael, and neither does he for me. We didn't marry for love, we just wanted to support each other. Over time, feelings did not develop. Just as friends, we live as relatives, good acquaintances. So I decided to register in the app. I didn't think it would come to a meeting, especially so quickly. But don't think I'm a cheater or a traitor, although my conscience is eating me up. It's all Isabella's fault, my friend. She put the idea into my head a few months ago. I didn't see it that way then. I realize now that Michael's been a real pain in the arse. Isabella told me that a woman without love is unhappy. And you immediately decided to look for love on a dating site? Ethan laughed. No, I do not think you are some bad. 1,000 women are unhappy in marriage. Someone is beaten, someone is humiliated. not appreciated, and everyone is not loved. I agree with your friend, but the same thing happens to men. It is from the outside we are so tough, independent, and unapproachable, but in the heart of all want this love, at least understanding. But even that is often unattainable. I registered myself because I realize I can't go on living like this. And I see how your face reflects everything inside. I'm not pulling you into bed, just chatting. Finding a soulmate is a breakthrough. Sometimes you just want to talk to someone warm and bright, and there's no one to talk to. Thank you for understanding me and not criticizing me. I'm sick of it. It's a mental emptiness. I realized at 35 that I'd never been in love, and I couldn't tell anyone what was going on inside me. Mia wouldn't understand me. She's young. Isabella, we're too different. Michael, when his business started to fail, he shut down. He won't even listen to me. It's all about money. Money, money, money in his mind and in his conversation. You work by yourself? Yes, but at home. I'm an estimator. The orders are stable, but I don't make much money. Especially after the sale of the flat, I've had to tighten my belt. I paid for a trip to a language camp. It took my whole stash. But I can't deprive my child of joy, especially when she has her first love there. And the boy went. His father flatly refused to sponsor the trip, and I couldn't stand to see her cry. You did the right thing. Especially when you're a teenager, you don't want to disappoint a child who loses faith in her parents. Mia's not like that. She and I are very close, but there's still a generational conflict. What do you do? Me? Ethan squinted. I have my own flower business. You have seen, probably around the city shops fan. Are they yours? Surprised Linda. Yes. And by the way, I completely forgot. Ethan nodded to the waiter who brought their order. In a minute, the boy brought a huge bouquet of pink peonies of a wonderful color, which Linda had never even seen before. Sorry, I asked the guys to put them in water. Wow. These are for me. Linda was genuinely surprised, inhaling the fragrance of the flowers. How beautiful. I've only seen them in pictures. Don't tell me that your husband doesn't give you flowers. Squinted Ethan. Only duty bouquets on the 8th of March and birthday. Somehow we got it that way. By the way, it was because of flowers, and I thought that in my life something wrong. Michael said himself, there's no romance. Who's supposed to create it? Me? That's not a fair game. If you want, I could send you flowers every day. Just like that. Although Michael probably wouldn't understand that. No, he wouldn't. I'd love to get flowers like that, but I don't know how to explain it to him, but I'll take it. Don't worry. I'll think of something. I love peonies. I'm glad I pleased you. Smiled the man. By the way, do you want to go for a walk after the cafe? Maybe to the seafront? I've never been there since the renovation, but I used to walk there a lot. I'd love to. Linda nodded. You can see my old flat from there, by the way. We lived by the river, and I used to walk there with Mia. I haven't been since we moved. That's great. Linda looked with admiration at the bouquet, which she placed in a vase on the dresser. Michael believed her fiction that the flowers had been sent by a customer as a token of gratitude for 5 years of cooperation. Linda breathed a sigh of relief. She was already ready to listen to a profanity-laced stream of words, but she got around it. Ethan did not go out of her head. During the walk, Linda had become convinced that this man was not only comfortable to be around, but also had a lot to talk about. He could support any topic, even her boring estimates. And in general, all communication was as if they had known each other for 1,000 years. At first, Linda even thought they had, because Ethan still seemed familiar to her. But she couldn't have known him. The man had been born in another city and had moved here when Linda was already married. Perhaps his face had just appeared in the business bulletins around town, because Ethan's shops were quite popular. As she made herself more comfortable in the bed, Linda fell asleep. Michael was snoring away from her by then. In the morning, she heard the doorbell ring. The door was opened by Michael. He was already awake and cooking something in the kitchen. Lida was in no hurry to get up. She only heard someone come in. Did someone come to Michael's house? She thought through sleep. If it was for me, he would have called me. All right, I'll sleep a little longer. But the dream had passed. Linda reluctantly got out of bed, threw on some clothes, and quietly left the room. In the hallway, she immediately saw the familiar shoes. They were Isabella's. Linda was embarrassed. So she's the one who came. Why didn't Michael call me? Where are they? Linda froze and listened. There were quiet voices coming from the kitchen. The door was closed. The woman was surprised, but then she thought she just didn't want to be woken up. If Isabella wasn't in a hurry, she could have waited for her friend to get up. Except that she rarely came in without calling. That made Linda a little wary. Immediately, the thought that something was wrong popped into her head. Linda tiptoed to the door to hear what the conversation was about. It wasn't her habit to eavesdrop, but curiosity got the better of her. When are you going to tell her? Isabella's voice was quiet but excited. Apparently, she was pacing the kitchen. Isabella, don't rush things. I'm thinking, but I don't know how. I don't want to traumatize her. Linda's a dear person to me, after all. Dear? When you put the baby in me, did it bother you at all? You can see my belly soon enough. How am I supposed to explain all this? I may have been mean to Linda by sleeping with you, but I don't want to cheat on her any further. Calm down. I'll think of something. In fact, why don't you just tell her you've had artificial insemination? You guys had a conversation about it once. What if the baby looks like you? Do I have to tell her that you're a noble donor? Don't be ridiculous. You have to come clean. Isabella, she'll kick me out in a heartbeat. I don't want to leave at all. I'm comfortable here. I don't love my wife as a woman, but I respect her. We have a daughter. Mia will hate me. He respects her. Who's been whispering things in my ear, burning with desire? Is that how you respect your wife? I'm sorry, I've never been married, so I might not know something. Don't be sarcastic. We were both wrong. Yes, I like you a lot, more than I like you. But I'm not ready to leave my family. I'll give you money for the baby. Don't worry about it. I've given so much already. I can't even give Mia pocket money. But you're welcome. But don't pressurize me, otherwise I'll just say that you've made it all up for your own purposes and then don't count on anything at all. Oh, you scared me. Michael, by now we can do a DNA test and prove it's your baby. Don't be ridiculous. What century are we living in? Anyway, it's up to you how you explain this to Linda. If you wait any longer, I'll do it myself. She is such a person, she will forgive you if you confess honestly. The longer we hide it, the worse it will turn out. Linda stood there, trying not to move. What she had heard did not make sense to her. God, she bit her lip and slowly, trying not to make a sound, headed back into the room. So Michael and Isabella were sleeping together. Not only that, but she's pregnant. This is crazy. When did they have time? Always like cat and dog, and now. And anyway, how did Isabella get her hands on Michael? He's not her type. Not at all. What a friend. How could she do that? I can understand Michael. Even now he's admitted he has no feelings for me. But Isabella, I've always trusted her. Even more than I trusted myself. What am I supposed to do now? Should we all raise her together? It's a load of bollocks. On the one hand, I'm happy for Isabella. It'll be good for her. But it's my husband's child and I can't just stand by and say nothing. What do they expect me to do? Just accept it. They're targeting the wrong person. They think I'm a wuss and a pussy? I'll give them hell. Linda slammed the door noisily to attract attention. She immediately walked towards the kitchen. Michael was waiting for her at the door, a look of surprise mixed with fear on his face. Isabella peered timidly from the table. Why are you making so much noise? Michael asked, trying to kiss his wife on the cheek. Yes, it's a drat. Linda replied grudgingly. Isabella, what are you doing here? What are you doing here so early? And on your day off? Yes, I'm on my way back from a visit, replied sweetly. I was close. I thought I'd stop by for a morning coffee. And Michael said you were still asleep, so we're just sitting here waiting for you to wake up. You gave us such a fright when you slammed the door. Scared when you have something to hide. Linda grimly decided and headed for the coffee machine. Isabella and Michael looked at each other in surprise. It didn't escape Linda's notice, and neither did Michael's slight squint or the tilt of his head that meant no. What are you talking about? He asked his wife. Yes, they say that, don't they? Linda laughed. Why are you both so tense, or are you really hiding something? Oh, right. I've got it all figured out." Linda looked at both of them enigmatically. Isabella turned a little pale, and Michael's cheekbones turned jaundiced. "Come on, confess. You want to surprise me for my birthday, don't you? It's only a couple of weeks away. Why didn't I realize?" She laughed. Isabella laughed nervously, and Michael laughed back. "Man, I can never hide anything from you." Isabella said, "We're really going to surprise you." At least she's not lying, Linda thought, staring at her friend. And she's not even ashamed. "It's okay, I'll get you guys." And I blamed myself for starting to talk to Ethan, because hypocrisy is rampant here. And I'm still playing the naive fool. "Isabella, look." "You're getting fat," Linda said casually, sitting down next to her friend. "For as long as I can remember, I've always been like a pole, but here my cheeks have grown, and I've even got a belly. You're eating sweets out of nervousness, aren't you?" "You think so?" Isabella clutched her stomach worriedly, and immediately raised her hands to her cheeks. "Not that, it's noticeable. Linda, I thought I was overdoing it. The scales are still broken at home, and it's not clear whether I've got fat or not." But the mirror was telling the truth. "Yeah, I started taking pills, and I guess I had a reaction." "What kind of pills?" Linda squinted. "Oh, just some vitamins the doctor prescribed. I've been walking around and I've been getting headaches. She said I'm overworked, I need to boost my immune system. And the vitamins are specific, I guess." "Yeah, it happens." Linda smiled. "I thought you were stressed out and you were doing it. You haven't told me anything lately." "Yeah, I don't have time, I've got a lot of work to do." "I'm sorry, Linda." "Okay, guys, thanks for the coffee. I won't interrupt anymore." "Are you leaving already?" Linda was surprised. "We haven't talked in 5 minutes." "Yeah, it's time to go home. But Michael and I have also settled our big question." Isabella looked at Michael reproachfully. "It's not a good surprise, but we'll do it anyway. You don't know what we've cooked up anyway." When Isabella left, Linda thought for a long time about what to do. She wanted to teach her unfaithful husband and friend a lesson, but she couldn't think of anything. She had already decided for herself that she would not forgive them, at least not yet. With Michael, the only option was divorce. Linda was so tired of her gray and boring life that she just didn't want to drag it out any longer. The news of Isabella's pregnancy was the last straw, when meeting Ethan. Linda hadn't considered a relationship with the man yet. Yes, she liked him a lot, but she didn't want to run into his arms after the first meeting. And what if he turned out to be a cheat or took advantage of her and immediately abandoned her? Such a scenario seemed extremely likely. But Linda was ready to take the risk. After all, she had nothing to lose. But to sleep together, even if they then immediately disperse, at least for one night she would be happy. But she didn't want to just silently apply. Mia would be back soon. How do I explain everything to her? She's a smart girl, she knows where babies come from, and she doesn't like Isabella. I didn't want the girl to overreact to her father's behavior. She loved him, and here. After dinner, Linda sat down on the sofa with her husband and pressed herself against his shoulder. "What are you doing?" Michael shuddered, not expecting his wife to show tenderness. "Michael," Linda said mysteriously. A plan had formed in her head. "There's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" Her husband became wary. "I don't even know how to begin. So tell me what you have to say. What's the point in dragging it out? We're not strangers." "Michael, tell me, do you love me?" "Here we go. Of course I love you. Where are you going to go? You're my wife. Do you love Mia?" What kind of stupid questions are these? She's my child. But then I want to make you happy. Linda's eyes sparkled. "Michael, I'm pregnant. You and I are going to have another baby." "What did you say?" Michael turned pale and even recoiled from his wife. "What? It's impossible?" "Why is it impossible? Aren't you excited? I always thought you wanted a son. Do you know the sex already? But we're not even sleeping together. When did this happen?" "I went to the doctor yesterday. To be honest, I didn't even think I was late because I was pregnant. I thought it was just my cycle being off." "Linda, we're not ready for a second baby right now. You know our money's tight." Michael was visibly nervous. He seemed to be calculating in his head how much it would cost him to support both children, his wife's and his mistress's. I know this is going to sound crazy, but we have to make an interruption. What termination, Michael? Linda had tears in her eyes. I'm 4 months pregnant. You can't do this. Linda, I can't believe you didn't know before. I can't believe how irresponsible you've been. You know we don't have the money. We don't have the flat. And Mia is at that age. It's impossible. We have to think of something. What are you going to do, Michael? I don't understand you. It's your child. You're suggesting I do a clandestine abortion, which will end up killing him and me. Why would it be clandestine? Why would we die? I'll arrange with a doctor I know. They'll do it at the hospital. They do abort at this term if it's life-threatening. But I'm not in any danger. It's just a formality, Linda. Misha jumped up from the sofa. You don't understand what's going on. No, Michael, no, I'm not doing any interruptions. Fine, don't do it. But then we'll put the baby in an orphanage after it's born. Are you out of your mind? Linda screamed. What orphanage? What is wrong with you, Michael? It's your baby. I'm not so sure about that. What? Linda squinted. What do you mean you're not sure? Linda, you and I don't have a close relationship. How could you get pregnant? Are you suspecting me or something? Shame on you. The timing fits. It was right after your birthday. Don't tell me you don't remember. Oh yeah, you were drunk. I remember everything. My husband grumbled. How can you do that, just once? It's just that God wants us to have a baby. Don't you understand? I don't care. Michael clutched his head. Don't you get it? A second child is a huge expense. I can support him on my own. Linda pressed her lips together. What are you talking about? My salary is enough for me and him. Mia's on your budget. Or are you giving up on her too? Or do you have something or someone that takes the lion's share of your income? Michael, I know exactly how you're doing. And I'm not asking where you're spending a few thousand a month to bypass the family budget. And don't lie to me about business. Do you take cash withdrawals and put them somewhere else? I don't know, maybe you have a stash in your mattress and you prefer to save a little bit in notes. I'm not getting into this, but you know, if you keep this up, I'm just going to leave. And you will never, ever, ever see your children again. That's it. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Linda, we need to calm down. You just shocked me with this news. I need to come to my senses. Where are you going? Linda followed her husband. I don't know. I need to go for a walk, mumbled Michael as he put on his trainers. Aha, Linda triumphed to herself. 100% to Isabella. I wonder what he'll say to her. It's a game changer. How will Michael get out of this? She hit the big one, the money. The funny thing is, Isabella's not going to let it go. She's going to get her alimony anyway. And she's going to make it look like such a scandal. And that bastard hasn't even mentioned a second child, even though he could have told me all about it. Well, I'm not really interested. The main thing is that he's twitching and Isabella's going to worry. Man. I feel sorry for her. Pregnant women shouldn't be nervous. I don't care. They weren't thinking about me. Why should I think about them now? In fact, I'd really like to see Ethan right now. Linda texted the man. He replied almost immediately, and Linda asked him to call her back. Is something wrong? Ethan asked worriedly. Ethan. Yes, something happened, Linda sighed. I think I'm getting a divorce. Oh my God, how can that be? Yesterday everything was not so categorical. Or did you make such a decision after talking to me? I didn't think I was capable of such a thing. No, you didn't. Linda laughed. It's different. Why don't we meet tonight? I'd love to. I'll be off in about 2 hours. Would that be convenient? Yeah, let's meet there then. Okay. Linda was standing outside the cafe when Ethan drove up. He flashed his headlights at her, and the woman got into his car. The man kissed her on the cheek, which sent a shiver through Linda's body. Well, what was so interesting? He asked. You know, I found out by accident. Well, remember I told you about my friend Isabella? That's the one who persuaded you to start paying attention to other men? Yes, Linda nodded and took a deep breath. Anyway, she's pregnant with Michael's baby. What? Ethan was surprised. I thought you said they couldn't stand each other. That's what I mean. I do not know when and where it all happened. But she's already 5 months pregnant. And apparently after the housewarming party, they were having a nice chat in the kitchen. I guess that's when they hit it off. I don't know the details. I overheard them talking in the kitchen today. I also blamed myself for thinking about cheating. Isabella wants Michael to tell me everything, but he won't. The funny thing is, I told him this afternoon that I'm pregnant too. You should have seen the look on his face. He said all sorts of things to me. Then he went off to Isabella's, probably. He wasn't even back yet when I left. They're both nervous now. Are you pregnant? Ethan looked scared. No, of course not. Michael and I do not sleep at all. I convinced him that all this happened after his birthday, when he was drunk and doesn't remember anything. Oh, I see. So what, you're getting a divorce right away? What's the point of dragging this out? I've put up with this whole life together before, but now I'm sick of it. I'm betrayed by 2 people who are close to me at once. I feel sorry for Mia, but I'll explain everything to her. I just don't want her to hate her father. Now I'm thinking about how to get revenge on Isabella. Revenge is a dangerous thing, Ethan said thoughtfully. But I don't even want to take revenge, but to teach her a lesson. Now I feel betrayed and angry with her. But objectively, given her attitude toward the children, she has already punished herself. If I loved Michael, then yeah. Now I'm just angry. But I know that he will not abandon the child, and they will not have a relationship anyway. Michael's a decent guy, and he'd give his last penny. Even the way he reacted to my pregnancy today, it's only natural. I can only imagine how he was calculating the costs in his head. What's the best way to teach Isabella a lesson? I don't know. She loves money too, she loves it so much. But I can't do anything about it. And as far as I know, she doesn't have a man at the moment. She could at least try to steal him away. That's sneaky. You don't look like you're capable of anything like that. Listen, what if you and I put on a show? You say Isabella's into men and money. Let me meet her, start courting her. And when things get serious, you'll accidentally steal me away from her. Are you serious? Linda laughed. It's all a bit childish. It's quite serious. I'm attracted to women. But not every one will be to my liking. But what if Isabella does? She's beautiful. What then? Who would be the fool? Me again. I won't like her, even if she's 3 times beautiful. It's not about beauty. She's a rotten person. I'll never look at someone like that in my life. So you're worried about me getting stolen? I'm not worried. Linda blushed. It's just that I really like you and I'm sorry to give you away. Linda, you don't have to give me away. I'm not a thing, and I'm not in over my head. And I'll tell you right off the bat, as an adult to an adult, I really like you. That's where it's appropriate to say you like me. I'm not counting on anything, and I won't pressure you for anything, but I just want to help you as a friend. Can we be friends now? My life is boring, and a play like this will at least give me some fun. I don't know, Linda thought. I don't really like it. How do you see it? Isabella knows a trick when she sees one. Well, you can imagine it for me. I'm a good actor. My ex-wife taught me. She used to do this kind of tour. Okay, Linda waved her hand. You got it. When do we start? Tomorrow. Give me her address and a picture of her. I already have some ideas. Linda was looking at pictures on her phone and showed Ethan Isabella. Yes, she's beautiful, the man nodded. But you can tell she's a predator. I've always avoided her. Shall we get started? I'll visit her tomorrow. Michael was acting aggressively. Linda fought with him several times in the evening. Apparently, Isabella said something that really pissed off her husband. But there was no way for Linda to find out. She preferred to lock herself in Mia's room and not cross paths with her husband. She took the bouquet of peonies with her. On Sunday, Michael left for work, saying he was very busy. Linda called Ethan and asked if he would be implementing his plan today. The man promised to let her know later what had been done. In the evening, they met again. Ethan looked cheerful. Yes, she's a real piece of work, your girlfriend, laughed the man. Tell me, come on, don't keep me waiting. Linda was impatient and curious. In general, Took her today in his shop a luxurious bouquet of 101 roses. Women are usually crazy about those. You've seen them, right? They come in these beautiful buckets, red as blood. It seemed to me that Isabella liked them just the way they are. So I drove with all this stuff to her house. I waited for a long time, like 2 hours. I didn't even know if she'd come out or not. And then a miracle happened. I was distracted by the phone, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that a woman was coming out of the entrance. I looked closely, and it was her. Well, I immediately got out of the car with these flowers, caught up with her, and stuck her this bucket. She looked at me with her eyes bulging, standing there, not understanding what was going on. And I said to her, "Girl, I'm sorry, but I've got a problem here. My girlfriend left me, I brought her flowers, but she refused. She found someone else. And I don't want the flowers to go to waste. So I sat down to look for someone to give them to. And as luck would have it, only mothers with children up to their grandmothers. I wanted to give them to a beautiful girl. And then you come along. So I almost fell down. I realized at once that I was in the right place. Don't be impertinent, take them." "What about her?" Linda was surprised. At first she was confused, of course, but then she squinted and took the flowers, saying I should take them home. And she thanked me. So I waited for her to come out again and persistently approached her. I said, "Girl, you'll forgive me, but I'm conquered. I've never seen such a beauty. Would you consider it an honor to meet her? I've got a reservation and I'm missing a table at the restaurant." So she said yes. I could tell she was hesitant, but something clicked. "And you've been to the restaurant?" Linda asked. "Yes, I took her there. We had dinner, had a very nice conversation. She even told me she was pregnant. She said her husband had left her and found someone else. Well, we mourned over our common grief, chatted about this and that. I asked her out again. I said, a baby's not a problem. I've always wanted one. And since I liked her so much, I'd be happy to continue getting to know her. And she said yes, of course. Naturally. She especially liked my car. I didn't drive my crossover, but another sporty one. Well, Isabella's eyes were burning. It's obvious that she had all the prospects in mind. So now it's just a matter of making her fall in love with him. Well, here, unlikely to succeed, Linda said disappointedly. Isabella has never fallen in love with anyone. She is a purely rational person. She is guided only by benefits. But she dreams of love. So let's give her that love. Well, I don't know how you'll do it, of course. Just trust me. With that, Ethan pulled Linda to him and kissed her. The woman's heart pounded desperately. What are you doing? She was embarrassed, but she didn't pull away. It's a sign that I'm serious, and that you have no doubts. In the meantime, I suggest we have dinner somewhere. Hopefully not Isabella, not your husband. We won't be caught. They chose a quiet, cozy restaurant. For the rest of the evening, Linda kept her eyes on Ethan. She felt everything inside her become airy and light. This had never happened to her before. Linda was working on her computer when her doorbell rang unexpectedly. Opening the door, the woman saw an extremely agitated friend. Isabella, what's wrong? Do you need to know? I can't hold it in any longer. Are you alone? Yeah, Michael's at work, and Mia's not flying until tonight. Come on in. Linda, I'm gone. Isabella rolled her eyes dreamily. Missing where? Linda squinted, realizing what she was getting at. I met a man last week, and it's like a fairy tale. He gave me a huge bouquet, like the most gorgeous thing ever. Oh, you've got something to be happy about. You've had a lifetime of flowers, but what's the use? No, Linda, this is different. He just walked up to me in the street and handed me these gorgeous flowers. I thought it was a joke at first, but he was persistent. He'd just broken up with his girlfriend. He asked me out on a date. I felt so bad. I said yes. I just fell head over heels in love with him. Name's Ethan. He's got his own business, sells flowers, drives a luxury car, owns his own house, and is divorced. But none of it matters. It's the first time I've ever felt like my man was destined to be my man. Yeah, okay, did you have a relationship with him before? No, that's the thing. He's so gallant. He doesn't push. He doesn't rush. He's so handsome. He's very interesting. I'd love to have him in my apartment. You should see how handsome he is. But I'm afraid of scaring him off. It's always like that with me. Once we sleep together, they run away, or it stays that way. I won't let that happen. And it's not about money at all. believe it or not. I'm really happy for you." Linda hugged her friend, happy that Ethan had managed to fulfill his promise. "Listen, can we come to your birthday party together? I really want to show him to you." "Would Michael mind?" "Michael?" Isabella was surprised. "What's he got to do with it?" "Well, he doesn't like you very much, and now you're bringing a date. You know, an extra mouth at the table. He's a cheapskate who counts every penny." "Oh, that Michael of yours. If you want, my Ethan will organize a whole banquet for you. I can ask him." "Don't. You'll really scare the man. A banquet is not a bouquet, especially not yours, but your friend's. It's okay. I'm setting the table, not Michael. So come by, sure, I'd love to meet your Ethan." "Great." Isabella kissed Linda on the cheek. "We owe you an awesome gift." "Isabella, don't charge him, please." "What are you talking about? What's he got to do with it? I wasn't thinking he owes me a bouquet. It's no problem at all. I can buy my own presents. Besides, it was my quarterly bonus." "Okay, you got me." Linda smiled. "You're getting chubbier and chubbier, by the way. Are you taking all your vitamins?" "Oh, don't say anything." Isabella blushed. "I'll be pregnant soon." "Well, I'm off. I still have things to do. See you later." Lita locked the door behind her friend and laughed. She immediately dialed Ethan. "Ethan." Linda laughed into the phone. "That's it, the fish is hooked. Now Isabella was at my place. She swears that she fell in love with you to death. And everything's going smoothly and sweetly between you two. Linda, I hope you're not jealous. We never had a thing with her, and we never will." "Yeah, I know. She told me all about it. She can't wait, but she's afraid she's going to miss out. She's holding on by her wits. I don't know what you're doing to her, but it's awesome. I'm expecting you two for your birthday this weekend. We'll do it then. I've already drawn up the divorce papers. All I have to do is hand them to Michael and put Isabella in her place." "That's great. What are you doing today?" "Mia's coming back today. I'm going to meet her and I want to tell her everything so she doesn't get the shock of the holidays." "Okay, I won't interrupt. I'll just keep working on your friend." By late afternoon, Linda was on edge. Michael took his time getting home from work, but that was to her advantage. She wanted to talk to her daughter alone. Mia was brought in by Oscar's parents. The girl flew into the flat, excited, flushed. She kissed her mother and chattered non-stop. When the girl had calmed down a little, Linda called her into the kitchen for tea. "Mia, I need to tell you something," she began delicately. "Mum, just don't start lecturing me. I'm not pregnant. I behaved properly and Oscar and I are fine. Thank you so much for helping me with the trip. I would have suffered so much. Emma Walsh has a thing for him too. And Oscar is such a wingman. Baby, this isn't about you, even though you had something to do with it." "What is it?" "Don't tell me Dad's broke again, and we have to move again." "No, I mean Dad's broke, but in a completely different matter." "What's that?" Mia's eyes popped out. "Mia, you're an adult, and you're not being unreasonable. Please just accept it and don't despair." "What's the matter? Did he file for divorce?" "No, Mia, I'm getting a divorce." "What?" My daughter's eyes widened. "Why would you do that?" "I'm sick of him. I'll keep it quiet. Anyway, Aunt Isabella's pregnant with Michael's baby, and they're keeping it from me. And I told your dad I was pregnant too, but it's not true. I just wanted to annoy him. Now he's hardly ever home. Of course he does, 2 pregnant women. Mum, we have to do something. I'm already doing something. The issue with Dad is settled. I'm filing for divorce. I can put up with a lot of things, but not this hypocrisy. You can talk to him any way you want. I won't interfere. After all, what happened is between me and him. It has nothing to do with you. And I'm asking you to stay out of it. If you come back from the divorce and you're back from him, he'll be devastated. Michael is a good man and a good father. I just don't want to live with him anymore. Wait, you're just giving him to Aunt Isabella. What about love? What love, Mia? Linda sighed. We never had any, just routine and comfort. Let him live as he likes. Isabella doesn't need him, but we can't let her get away with it. Well, darling, don't worry. The plan to punish her is already in motion. Let's hear more about it. Mia's moving in closer. What plan? Mia, I met a man. Linda's blushing deep red. A man. Mum, you're all red. Don't tell me you're in love. I guess I am. Linda smiled. Who's the man? His name is Ethan. Very nice. You'll see him on Saturday. Is he coming here? Mia collapsed. Yes, but you're going to have to play along with me. You see, Ethan was the one who figured out how to teach Isabella a lesson. Now he's doing everything he can to make her fall in love with him, and he's succeeding. Isabella came running this morning to tell me she's in love. Okay, I don't get it. If they're in love and you like him, how is that even possible? It's an act, Mia. Linda patted her daughter on the head and told her plan. Well, Mum, I didn't expect this from you. Look, don't be sorry. But Dad, I don't even know how he's going to act. He can do what he wants to do. I don't care anymore. When Michael returned home from work, his daughter showed nothing of herself. She was a little more reserved with her father. There weren't many guests. Linda set the table, put on a beautiful dress. Mia hung balloons and tinsel everywhere. Michael tried to pretend that he was happy with what was going on, but from time to time he glanced at his wife, trying to see her protruding belly. Naturally, he saw nothing, which made him even angrier. Finally, the doorbell rang. It was Isabella. Ethan stayed behind, holding a huge bouquet of peonies. Here we are. Isabella was glowing with happiness. Meet Ethan, the man of my dreams. Michael stood red as a cancer and looked hatefully at Isabella, at her companion, and at the flowers. But Linda quickly tried to ease the tension and invited everyone to the table. Mia watched Ethan with interest, occasionally glancing at her mother, and smiled meaningfully. It was obvious that her daughter liked the man. When the fun was in full swing, Linda noticed that neither Isabella nor her husband were at the table. She approached Ethan and invited him out on the balcony to admire the view. It looks like everything is going according to plan. Ethan smiled. I saw Isabella go to the bathroom and Michael followed her, and they've been gone for about 10 minutes. Apparently they're working things out. All we have to do is wait. I warned Mia, and most of the guests are gone. The ones that are left aren't really interested in our marital bliss. So can I kiss you? Linda smiled, and without waiting for her consent, he gently took her chin and pulled her to him. Linda didn't know how long the kiss lasted, but it seemed infinitely long. She felt even more pleasure at the anticipation of being caught like this right now. Linda. Michael almost shouted. What are you doing? Isabella's voice broke into a shriek. We. The woman looked closely at her husband and friend, pulling away from Ethan's lips but remaining in his arms. Kissing, can't you see? We can see that. Michael was outraged. I'm asking what the hell is going on here. And I'm wondering. Isabella glared at Ethan and her friend. How can I explain it to you? Ethan began confused. Love is happening here. What else can you call it on sight? Yes, Linda smiled. I would call it that too. No, you've got a nerve. Michael continued to shout. Not only are you doing this, but you're making fun of us. Linda, are you ashamed to kiss the first guy you see in the marital home? And you, honorable man, are you so drunk that you mistook your woman for mine? No, sir, Ethan mocked him. You confused your woman with mine. What are you talking about? Michael shouted, pulling away from Isabella, who was ready to lunge at the embracing couple. About what's under Isabella's breasts. Linda squinted at him. Who exactly? Isabella and Michael looked at each other. The woman went dramatically pale and the man blushed even more. Did you know everything? Isabella asked her friend, pressing her lips together. Yes, she nodded. For a couple of weeks now. You came in the morning and I overheard everything. But why, then, didn't you charge me with anything? What would I say and what would I hear in return? I wanted you to realize what a despicable thing I'd done. But you never even loved Michael. Yeah, but he's still my husband, and you had no right to use him. Wait a minute, Michael interjected. You mean Linda was aware of everything and acted so calmly? And now what, like your baby? There is no baby, Michael, Linda replied. I made the whole thing up to see how you'd behave. And you, believe me, proved that I made the right decision from the beginning. The right decision? I questioned my husband. Yes, we're divorcing you. All the documents are ready. I'll tell you right away that with Mia, you see, I will not interfere. She is already aware of everything and will live then with me, then with you. Thank your daughter for not hating you after all this. Divorce? Michael's eyes widened. Yeah, what did you want? I don't want to live with you anymore. I realize you're not going to be so comfortable right now. Linda sneered. But it's better for everyone. All right. Well, make it clear to me, what does Ethan have to do with this? Linda, even the whole situation does not give you the right to hang on my man's neck. Are you Ethan? Are you out of your mind? It's nothing personal. Linda asked me to help her. Wait, Isabella wrinkled her forehead. You mean you two know each other? Well, yes, nodded Ethan. And not just acquainted. I can already say with certainty that I love this woman. The blood rushed to Isabella's face. She finally realized what had really happened. Tears spurted from her eyes. She pushed Michael away and ran away. Not a minute later, the front door slammed. Michael remained standing in the doorway. Linda walked past, leading Ethan by the hand. Mia looked on in bewilderment at all that was going on in the company of a couple of the remaining guests. You've got to be kidding me, was all her daughter said. Linda pressed and pressed the bell, but no one came to the door. Then the woman started pounding on the door with her fist, a dark suspicion creeping in. Finally, something inside clicked and the door opened. Why did you come? Isabella asked in a tired voice. She had lost a lot of weight, but under her pink bodysuit she could see a well-shaped belly. Isabella, I need to talk to you. Linda smiled guiltily. She hadn't spoken to her friend for 3 months since her birthday. Well, come in now that you're here. Isabella moved aside, letting her guest inside. Isabella. Linda sighed heavily and looked her friend straight in the eye. I came to apologize. For what? The woman grinned. For that play. I don't care. It was my own fault. I should be the one apologizing to you. Your husband made a baby for me. How's he doing, by the way? Not so good, to be honest. I haven't seen him since the divorce. Mia sleeps over at Michael's every day. Thanks to her. Without his daughter, he'd be out of his mind. How's he treating you? Well, he puts money on my card. But I'm going back. I don't want anything from him. I make a good living myself. I decided, as you advised, to have a child for myself. I'm being punished by karma for my consumerist attitude to life. The baby, you know, Linda, I didn't want it at first. I thought I'd get rid of it, and then I used it to manipulate Michael. And then I met Ethan, and it was like I had no more real feelings. It changed everything in my head. How is he, by the way? Good, he gave you flowers, but I left them in the car. I didn't know if you'd open them or not. I'll get them. Don't. Isabella smiled faintly. Isabella, it's from the heart. We collected the bouquet especially for you. No, you don't understand, laughed her friend. I'm allergic. Even indoor plants all move to my dad. I don't want to see the baby. Really? Linda was surprised. You poor thing. Linda held her friend tightly and felt her shaking with sobs. What are you doing? Questioned Lyda. How not to cry. Isabella sobbed. I did not think that you are such a kind aunt. Well, how can such a trash like me forgive and even hug here to stand? And don't forget I'm hormonal. And both women laughed. Ira, when's the baby due? Linda asked, munching on the cake that her friend had baked in the morning. It's delicious. I never realized you were such a good cook. Thank you, Isabella smiled. While I'm at home, I'm learning. And how will the baby look at me later? Yes, in 3 weeks the doctor says so. Oh, I'm so scared. What's there to be afraid of? 1 million women give birth, and you're no worse. But I'm old. Have you even heard that the government wants to raise the age of old age to 36? So you don't even fall into that category. What are you talking about? Isabella looked at Linda suspiciously. Yes, it's too early to say, but the woman hesitated. I haven't even told Ethan anything yet. But I took a test this morning and I got 2 stripes. Oh, come on. Wow, you guys are fast. You've only known each other for a little while. How long? 4 months. Yeah, I know it's not that long. But we're adults. We don't have time to make mistakes, and look. I can feel myself drawn to him. And he's attracted to me. You told me yourself that without love a woman is unhappy. And now I feel loved and needed and wanted. I really had no idea it could be like this. What I saw with Michael and before him, all the men before him weren't serious. And then I was struck by lightning. Yeah, I went through something like that with Ethan myself. It's a different kind of energy. I can't imagine how his ex-wife could pass up such happiness for some guy in Dubai. Lucky you, baby. Of course I'm jealous. I can't argue with that. There's still something about Ethan. No, it's not love, of course. But I had a huge crush on him. I've never felt anything like it either. You know, I'm done now, and I'm done now, and I'm done. I've got a lot more feelings to experience now. I know what it's like to be a mother, but soon I'll really understand. I'm happy for you, mate. Lita kissed her friend on the forehead. And anyway, it doesn't matter what happened there. Let's be optimistic about the future. By the way, your son will be my Mia's brother. Do you realize that? Shit. You do, don't you? Isabella was surprised. I hadn't even thought of that. So we're related now? Yes, we are. Linda laughed, and Mia will not be laughing now. 2 brothers to bring up at once. Mia's going to be so happy she's going to whistle away. You and I can manage on our own. All right, Isabella, I'll go. I'm going to stop by the gynecologist to make sure the test is accurate. And then I'll let Ethan know. Let me know too. Don't forget. I love you, Linda. You're the best woman in the world. And I love you. I don't care what happened. Linda sat in the dark kitchen of Ethan's city flat. They usually went to the country house for the weekend. It was more convenient to live here to get to school faster. Although the girl often stayed at her father's house, but Linda still thought of her first and foremost. Ethan didn't mind. He and Mia quickly found a common language. The girl even showed an active interest in floristry and often came to the central shop fan to learn this craft. Linda clutched tightly in her hands a sheet of paper with a picture attached to it. When the light came on in the hallway, the woman flinched. Ethan also flinched when he entered the kitchen, turned on the light, and saw his woman sitting in a chair. Linda, he said, pretending to hold his heart. Why are you sitting in the dark? Why are you home anyway? Mia said you 2 were going out tonight. Mia and Oscar went on a bike ride. Oh, for a bike ride. They're closing out the season. I went on a business trip and I'm back now. Your own thing? What's that, I wonder? Ethan squinted. And it does not explain sitting in the dark. What is this paper you have? And this, Linda caught up. Ethan, they told me to give it to you. Jesus, Linda, why is the tone so mournful? You scare me? Who told to give? Stork. What kind of name is that? I've never heard it before. And you look at it, you'll recognize it immediately. Lita handed the man the ultrasound results. He ran the text several times with his eyes, twirled the image, and looked silently at Linda. Nothing to say? Linda opened her eyes. I can't read handwriting. Ethan blushed. It's from the hospital, I get it. An X-ray or something. Jesus, are you serious? Linda laughed. X-ray. Vanya, I'm pregnant. You and I are going to have a baby. I've heard that somewhere before. Michael was also played by you. Just so you know, there's nothing to avenge. You're a fool. Lita gently stroked the man on the head. Ethan, I'm serious. You and I will have a child. You see, all somehow quickly so, but it's true. The man's eyes lit up. Really? God, baby, yes, this is the best news of my life. I couldn't even dream of this. Ethan picked Linda up in his arms and started kissing her cheeks, forehead, and eyes everywhere. Linda laughed and tried to pull away. What kind of fun is going on here? Came Mia's voice. Ethan and Linda froze and looked at each other. Well, you tell me. Winked the man. Linda nodded. Ethan gently lowered her to the floor. Linda walked over to Mia and looked into her eyes. Baby, just don't make a scene, the mother said seriously. I know that in families there is competition between children, And the older ones are often jealous of the younger ones. Well, it shouldn't be like that in ours. Mom, are you all right? Mia touched her mother's forehead to check for a fever. What older kids, what younger kids? I'm kind of on my own. Aunt Isabella's having my half-brother soon, though. Is that what you mean? Almost. Mother laughed. Aunt Isabella has a brother and I have a sister. Well, perhaps it's too young to tell the sex, but somehow I think it will be a girl. Mum, Mia's starting to get the message. Are you saying you're having a baby? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. No way. Mia shook her head. And you are good, Ethan. What do you mean? You're going to put 2 babies on me at once? What traitors? Mia laughed loudly. Linda laughed, and then Ethan laughed, too. Not having met his wife from the maternity hospital, the husband went to his mistress. And 5 years later, Barbara was walking home from the antenatal clinic. But no, walking is the wrong word. She was hopping, then suddenly quickening her step, then stopping on the run. The young woman was happy and kept replaying in her head the words of the pretty doctor. Are you going to have a baby? Are we going to register? Or do you have other plans after such a provocative question? Barbara almost angrily retorted. Did you really think I would want to terminate the pregnancy? The doctor smiled. Why were you so shocked? You're young, you're beautiful. According to the examination, you're perfectly healthy. Now girls like you, trying to make a career, make their way to the top, and strengthen themselves on the material Olympus. Only then, in their 30s, do they think of procreation. You're only 21. Things happen. You and your husband are still students, I take it? The woman's doctor was right on the money. She and Calvin were still in their 4th year of university. He's a lawyer-to-be. She's a philologist. But their flat is not a rented one, but a real one, their own. They live in 2 cozy, spacious rooms. It was the parents on both sides of the family who had splurged on the apartment as a wedding present. Barbara lit up with pleasure, imagining Calvin's delight at her news of the addition to the family. They'd been married for 3 years, but things had somehow never worked out before with a baby. She'd even dragged her husband to a consultation at an expensive private clinic, where they'd been examined from top to toe. The summary was pleasing. Both are practically healthy. No physiological incompatibility is observed. Be patient for 1 year to 3 years if you are not specifically using protection. Lack of conception is considered normal, they were told at the clinic. Barbara smiled slyly at the time. Any hint of contraceptive use was immediately put to rest, she told Calvin. It's too early, you say, and you would like to buy nappies and a nappy at about 40 years old. Maybe it's too early for us to have a close relationship if you are not yet morally ready to take responsibility for the child. When you're mentally ready, I'll keep you warm. Calvin agreed with her reasoning pretty quickly. And who among men would like all these restrictions and obstacles? It's just boredom and zero fun. The subject was once and for all closed. Except that once a month, Barbara's mood briefly soured. Her body signaled that she was, alas, not pregnant again. In the years of reckless youth, such disappointments passed quickly. Calvin would drag her out to a nightclub, to the cinema, or to her favorite pastry shop. Then they'd sit side by side, cramming notes, each on a different subject, serious ones. Calvin liked to quiz her on the U.S. Penal Code, testing his memory at the same time. Nonsense, his wife judged through gritted teeth with a disapproving look. I can't get those laws mixed up. I know the criminal code almost by heart, unlike you. So who are you giving a stern look to? Honey used to look tough when he was a lawyer. The world of crime is not a family life, spell it with an I. They usually ended with a passionate reconciliation in each other's arms. Barbara dreamed again. Maybe it's happened, and she's already pregnant. Barbara came from a large family, adored all 4 of her sisters. She couldn't imagine life without children's voices and the noise of the house. The Smith family in a town near Los Angeles knew everyone. No kidding, they were proud of them. Olivia was too bright for a small town. How did her parents come to name this red-headed, freckle-faced beauty? She was always either pregnant or nursing. The girl gave birth one after another. All the daughters were completely similar to the handsome father who could play in the cinema some English lord. Call him Christian, as his parents called him, the townspeople refused flatly. He was called simply Chris since he settled with his wife in this favorable town. The story of their young family from the first moment aroused the burning interest of the neighbors, the descendants of old-school immigrants. Their ancestors had migrated to the United States with the Germans under the great leaders of the country, when German colonists were drawn to the lands between the great rivers. Croats, Englishmen, Poles, Serbs, Bulgarians were occasionally found among them. A mixture of blood, a mixture of nations. The descendants have almost no authentic features left from those ancient times, except that they still gave their children unusual names by American standards. And so it turned out that in a shady town drowning in orchards settled permanently Christian and Olivia. The tradition of giving their children rare names was probably the only thing that this family kept sacredly unchanged. They named their first daughter Amanda. Then came Bridget, Florence, Barbara, and the last baby Emma. Chris and Olivia, as they were persistently called in the town, were considered hard-working and good-natured people. They loved their girls in the land, which gave them rich crops for their careful care. And everything would have been fine and quiet. Only fate had decreed otherwise. On little Emma, it seemed, the laboring woman's strength had run out. God was no longer going to grant Olivia any new heirs. Moreover, already at an early age it became clear that the tiny Emma is not all well with health. The disease was selective. Emma had no difficulty swallowing water or food. She didn't have any seizures that frightened others. She was barely behind her peers in speech, hearing, and vision. Her fate was weak muscles that did not allow her to move freely according to the inexhaustible childlike energy. The little girl's body seemed to be in some terrible spasm all the time. It was both frightening and painful to watch. Olivia, who had always worked in the garden, had suddenly grown quiet. She stopped wearing brightly colored sundresses, smiling at neighbors when they met, chatting to women in the queue at the shop. When there is real grief in someone's home, people secretly try to avoid people so that the negativity is not transmitted. Christian and Olivia marveled at this sudden isolation at first, but then they accepted it. God is the judge of these hard hearts. Mary, the elderly neighbor, who had been through a lot herself, did not separate her parents from themselves. On the contrary, Mary kept telling Olivia, "Come to the witch Dr. Betty, who lives 20 kilometers from us. Maybe she can tell you something. What to do with your baby." After listening to her recommendations, Christian and Olivia decided to do the experiment, put little Emma in the back seat of their car, and went to the address. Betty asked no unnecessary questions. Whispering with her lips, she crossed the girl and gave her verdict. "Don't shed your tears for nothing. Your child is sunny, kind, affectionate. She will continue her strange movements with the support of her arms and legs. But she will warm people's hearts all her short life. Soon she will begin to do her chores. She will have no equal in affection and warm power in your town. Everyone will want to touch the magic girl to warm her soul." And then Betty quickly ushered them out the door with the girl. Christian and Olivia drove home in silence, and then the woman seemed to burst into tears. "My dear husband, you have always been with me in sorrow and in joy. I'm sure that you will be with me through this journey to the end. In the meantime, let's bring laughter, joy, and smiles back into our home. Let's raise all of our daughters in love and harmony." Christian and Olivia kept their word. They returned home revitalized. Happy streams flowed down their arms. The trees had already bent their branches, laden with large, fist-sized apples. In the vegetable garden, the unharvested potatoes were waiting for their time. Bright orange carrots nodded with lacy green. The ripe beetroots, grain to grain, fruit to fruit, what went into the cellar, what would go to the market. Barbara's parents had set themselves the goal of raising their daughters to be educated and honorable people, and they were stubbornly pursuing their dream without turning back. Barbara had already pressed the doorbell when the mobile phone rang in her purse. When she heard her husband's voice in the receiver, she immediately made her voice as mysterious as possible and whispered, "Calvin, I have a terrific surprise for you. You're going to have a sumptuous celebration dinner tonight," Wendy said. And the good news she wanted to tell. She needed something else nice to put her lover in a romantic mood beforehand. But Calvin said that he was busy, running to the skating rink, but by the appointed time we'll be sure. On the kitchen tiles on the floor, the mum-to-be glides like a waltz. Chicken with round potatoes around it into the oven. Red fish, which she loved immensely, into the frying pan. Now she will still put together a salad of fresh cucumbers, tomatoes with herbs and garlic, and the holiday dinner will be ready. For Calvin, a bottle of wine. For herself, a fan of a healthy lifestyle, sweet carbonated drinks. No, I'm gonna have to cut out the sugary drinks for now. Their baby didn't need that bubblegum chemistry. Barbara looked round the table once more, took out the brightly colored paper napkins she'd been saving for special occasions, set out the plates from the old porcelain set with gold ornaments. She stacked the massive forks and knives next to them. She had never been able to like all that fancy modern crockery, thin and clinking, made like twins, where similar sets were indistinguishable from each other. For dessert there was good old Praga cake, which she had adored since childhood. Maybe she remembered it so well because their first family trip to the big city ended with a visit to a bakery, where everyone was bought a large sliced cake Prague, generously poured with chocolate icing. Since then, it had stuck in her memory that where that cake was, there was the happiness of serenity. Barbara twirled around the wardrobe, choosing an outfit for dinner. She wanted to impress her husband's imagination with the news of her pregnancy and her appearance. She was sure that in the aggregate everything would look like fireworks, would strike Calvin to the core, would touch his tender, loving heart. Her spouse did not deceive her expectations. At the appointed time, she heard the keys rattle in the keyhole and hurried to meet her soulmate. "Betty, you look fantastic," Calvin announced to her from the doorstep. "What kind of holiday are we having today?" "What are you all dressed up for?" Calvin asked. "Don't rush, darling, change first. Here are your house slippers." Calvin gradually changed, washed his hands, and went to the table. He thought to himself with annoyance, "I should have at least bought some flowers on the way." Was it for nothing that he had recently started working part-time in a reputable law firm? Now he always had some money. It was not all to ask his parents for pocket money. Of course they won't refuse, they don't count every penny. But independence is better than material dependence. Barbara put the salad on plates, took out a ruddy chicken from the oven, shyly glistening with its fried sides and a halo of golden potatoes. She made up her mind and blurted out, "My darling, I'm so happy. We're going to have a baby." Calvin immediately turned pale, and then his face turned red. He almost choked on his wine, and then asked fearfully, angrily and sharply, "Are you sure? Have you been to the doctor?" Barbara looked up at him in surprise and thought for the first time that she didn't appear to know this man or his reactions well. It's a shock. Calvin, meanwhile, came to his senses and unleashed a harsh, implacable monologue. "You've had enough. All the adventures you wanted. Pram, cot, porridge, sleepless nights. Have you thought about me? Am I ready to be a dad at 22? I told you to see a doctor and get yourself some reliable birth control. I don't need all this baby stuff here. If you're old enough, go and get an abortion." The young woman couldn't believe her ears. Her husband was saying all these words. Her always courteous, so gentle and attentive Calvin, with whom they had walked side by side until the leather wedding. As recently as 2 months ago, they celebrated their 3rd wedding anniversary. "Do whatever you want. I don't want this baby," he said flatly. "I hate to tell you, but I'm a big believer in the child-free movement. Do you remember the word child-free? That's my credo." "If you get rid of that baby, then we'll talk," Calvin said flatly. "In the meantime, I'm going outside to get some air. Your fancy news makes me feel a little sick." Barbara threw her things into her bag, shedding bitter tears. A thought ran through her mind. "That's not my Calvin. It's like he's got a demon in him, making him say all those horrible words. I'll go to my parents for a while, come to my senses, share the good news with them, and he'll cool down and change his mind," she decided. "Otherwise, how can I live with such a weight on my heart? I don't even want to think about what would happen if all this wasn't an accident, but a sudden collapse of my family happiness and my whole life." Calvin sat at the bar in a cozy drinking establishment and couldn't understand how he had found himself here. The subdued light streaming from the beautiful orange fixtures created a stunning, soulful atmosphere. None of the visitors made any noise, nor did they stand out in the general chorus of voices. There was a group of pretty girls sitting right next to Calvin, celebrating something in a small circle of women. Even they, who were clearly already tipsy, were having a lively conversation without attracting too much attention from the men. 200 grams of cognac, Calvin said to the bartender. And a slice of lemon without sugar, please. He drank the amber liquid in one gulp, as if intoxicated. Immediately he ordered another drink. He felt warm inside. He felt that his tongue could hardly move in his mouth. But he was suddenly so anxious to complain to someone that he started talking to the bartender. You see, Brother, Barbara and I have always been different. I've never been attracted to any girl before her. Just flings. And she's beautiful, hair black as pitch, eyes gray-green, penetrating as if she was looking through me. A luscious figure. The tipsy Calvin gathered his strength and continued his confession. One thing about her, I never understood what is the passion for these little creatures, always disturbing parents to live peacefully. What nonsense. Calvin was indignant. I want a child and she's driving me crazy with her dreams. At least God was merciful and didn't give us offspring for 3 years. And then I come home today and there's a festive table, wine, my wife all dressed up, eyes shining. I could have expected anything, but not such a sudden surprise from her. She's pregnant, you see. Did she ask me before baffling me with such a freeloader? A ringing silence hung over the table where the pretty girls were sitting with cocktails in their hands. All the girls at the hen party could hear every word Calvin said, and they began to whisper, wondering to whom of those present such words about children were addressed. Only to those who were careless and had no desire to procreate. And he himself would like to live carefree and carefree. The young ladies laughed at first, but then began to go home at once. The mood was ruined. Only May looked back at the impolite young man at the door. Handsome, you could make a film as a hero lover. He's a fool when he's drunk, she thought, and opened the front door sharply, catching up with her friends. The time was late. Barbara was sitting at the suburban railway station, where the last train was about to arrive. She hadn't seen Calvin come home drunk and hadn't even noticed the absence of her suitcase. Her husband collapsed on the bed and fell into a heavy sleep, not feeling guilty about the quarrel. Barbara called her father, who certainly wouldn't be surprised by her late arrival. Something had happened, then. Christian listened to her confused speech in silence, then answered meekly. I'll be waiting for you at the railway station, daughter. Be careful on the road. And I'll tell Mom that you missed us unexpectedly. Olivia listened outwardly calmly to her husband's news of Barbara's unexpected arrival, and did not let on that the news had caused her any serious concern. Closing the gate behind her husband's car, Olivia went round to see who was still under her parents' wing. Amanda and Bridget had been living with their husbands and children in different cities for years, wherever fate had thrown them. For them, Olivia was completely at ease. Just today, she'd been chatting to both of them on her mobile phone. 19-year-old Emma was tossing and turning in her sleep, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Florence was quiet and serene in the realm of Morpheus. In her 23 years, she was a sturdy girl with nerves of iron, the first helper in the house and garden for the not-so-vigorous and young Christian and Olivia. The woman lovingly stroked her youngest daughter's shoulder, smiling. My sunshine. Anna. There were no frowning clouds of unhappiness around the boy's neck among all the household. Their trip to Betty's witch doctor had a magical effect on the villagers. Before, they had all tried to pass them quickly. Suddenly Olivia, or Christian, would stop them in the street and say, I brought some goat's milk for Emma, but I've got enough. Where is it going? And you have a special girl, God bless her. At other times, someone would sneak in a bowl of strawberries, a bucket of May honey, or apricots under the wicket. If Olivia was carrying a girl in a wheelchair, no one would turn aside from their path. Then one day an unforeseen event happened. 2 yards away from the Christian family home lived another family with many children. They knew no grief, only there were boys growing up one after another. Their mother, Agnes, worked on a farm. Their father was a trucker. He drove cargo all over the vast country. No one could say how it happened that they went off and climbed up to the barn. After work, grandmother looked after them in the farm, but that time she lost sight of them. They managed to climb up to the high roof without any obstacles. But how to climb back down? They didn't think about it at the age of 3 or 5. Nothing sensible went into their heads. Jump down onto the straw, suggested the eldest of them. To his misfortune, the little one jumped down, and he fell unluckily on his back, breaking his still fragile spine. Agnes, who had come from the cows at the cries of the neighbors, picked the boy up and dragged him to the infirmary. But it was impossible to touch him with such an injury without qualified medical assistance on the spot. The young body eventually fused the broken bones in the wrong way. The boy remained somehow bent, and when he grew up a little, his legs stopped obeying for good. He was taken to the regional clinic, and the doctors there consulted with foreign doctors. The verdict was the same: it was impossible to help the boy. Now he would have to live like that until he was old. Agnes, in her 35 years, turned into an old woman in a flasher, and her husband's temples were thickly grayed. She would look at her son, sigh in silence, and then she would be off again. There was a sepulchral silence in the house. Not a laugh from the younger boys, not a groan from the most crippled child. It was as if everything had died out. And then one day Agnes came to Olivia's house to get a pair of scissors to trim the excess branches on the trees. And in the house, Emma was just sitting by the window with a book. She raised her bottomless brown eyes to Agnes and held out her hands to her. Agnes was surprised the girl came up, took her hand, and remained silent. And Agnes felt a warmth flowing through her veins and veins. Believe it or not, a heavy stone had fallen from the shoulders of the blameless mother. She looked at Emma carefully, thinking that this girl was not destined for a happy life either. And how kind and warm her face glowed. At home, Agnes immediately started cleaning, baked cakes, and read stories to the boys. She bathed the eldest, changed his clothes, and put him on a high bed with a mountain of pillows under his head. Now she had other thoughts in her head. Fate is hard on us. But my boy is alive and with me by my side. Time will tell how long we both have to live like this. But I will try to make him learn everything that his maimed body will allow him to do. Get the sadness out of the house. You will not break us, but the miraculous warmth, which can heal the soul and guide those on a positive path who do not see a way out of a difficult situation. The news soon spread throughout the village. Some ironically dismissed it, others decided to test her gift for themselves. Moreover, one gossip girl claimed that the girl was a sorceress, bringing her out into the open. And it turned out to be the other way round. When Emma stretched out her hands, which could give warmth and comfort, the woman was like an electric shock. And the girl's arms and legs began to twitch so violently that Olivia, who was sitting nearby, was frightened. "Little witch," shrieked Agnes, the experimenter. "You electrocuted me, you charlatan." Emma didn't say anything back. Olivia, on the other hand, was not confused. "That's how I knew I shouldn't have let you in the house." Her neighbor, how many people go to her house? It's never happened before. Her daughter, who had already arrived, stopped her. "Mum, don't. Everything is fine." The girl had never mastered long sentences, but it was always possible to understand her speech. Emma smiled briefly and took another look at the woman who had come for her warmth and added, "She won't come again." It was impossible to conceal any incident in a small village. The villagers believed even more now that Emma was a child with an extraordinary gift for soothing the heart and soul. Since then, her abilities have never been abused unnecessarily. And when they did, they always wanted to be near the sunny girl and soak up her positive energy. Olivia was distracted by the sound of a car pulling up to the house and hurried to meet Barbara and her husband on the doorstep. "Barbara, honey, it's so good to see you. Your eyes are tearful. Is something wrong, daughter?" The woman quickly put the kettle on the cooker, took out from the shelf strawberry jam, vases with biscuits. By the way, why ask about something excited from the doorstep? Maybe their conversation won't be for men's ears. After getting everyone drunk on tea and sweets, Olivia sat down on the edge of the bed next to Emma. "Shall we talk about the good stuff or leave it till morning? The morning is wiser," she asked. Barbara stretched happily under the warm cotton duvet, took her mother's hand, and whispered, "I'll tell you all the details. Tomorrow, Mummy. I'll tell you the main thing: I'm having a baby. I am ready to go through any trials to make this baby come into the world." She said the last words almost through sleep, having time to think. "I'm home, it's so nice here." Olivia smiled understandingly back at her daughter, but she couldn't see anything else. "Here's another one of my blood, soon to be a mum herself. Life flows like a full-flowing river, past steep banks, past flowering meadows, past joys and troubles. One generation succeeds another. No one can stop these laws of being." May had been stirring the sugar in her coffee cup for 10 minutes now, monotonously passing the teaspoon round and round, not even noticing that the flavored drink had long since cooled down. She couldn't get that man in the bar and his words about not accepting children in the family out of her mind and was ready to announce it to the world. All the way back home, her girlfriends kept telling her he was wrong. Without a baby, a family will always be incomplete. Aren't infertile women the only ones who go out of their way to become mothers? May didn't share their enthusiasm. She liked to take a long look at herself in the mirror in the morning. When all the household had gone to work, she admired her perfect body without a single external flaw. And who needs this huge, ugly belly, turning a woman into a scarecrow, she thought. I could so easily have done without all this torment and ordeal. And who decided that motherhood is a woman's lot on this earth? Nonsense and nonsense. I may see my destiny in being the mate, or better still the wife, of a handsome man like the one I saw in the bar last night. To share his views. To live a life of pleasure together, just for ourselves, the ones we love. What's not a splendid plan for the rest of your life, May said aloud. She had not, of course, announced such a manifesto to the girls yesterday. These friends are already dreaming of a full family with all the consequences that entails. I wonder if that man is a regular visitor to their favorite bar, or was he there by chance? I should go there more often in case our paths cross again, she pondered. After a cold coffee and a piece of cake, May hurried to the university. Her diploma defense was in a few months' time, and her thesis report had nothing in it yet. She was going to get an earful from her supervisor. At 7, Calvin was awakened by the insistent melody of his favorite song. The lead singer of the band, with a strained, squeaky voice, right next to his ear, kept repeating, "You hate." God, he thought, waking up with a hangover, I wish I hadn't learnt German at school and university. The obvious translation wouldn't have got on my nerves then. The song was his favorite track. That's why he put it on his phone to his mum's call, as he lovingly called the woman who brought him into the world. Calvin had a surprisingly warm relationship with his mother. If his father once chased him for negligence in studies and laziness in sports, sending the boy to the section almost from the age of 5, his mother always took pity on him and fulfilled any whim. He simply could not answer her call. "Honey, what's wrong?" Mum asked him right off the bat. "You both haven't picked up the phone since last night. Did you go out with your mates on a weekday? Or are you so busy with your books that your ears are filled with knowledge like cotton wool?" Calvin tried to reconstruct in his head the events of last night, starting with his arrival home. He walked through the rooms, looked in the kitchen. Barbara was nowhere to be found. It was clear that his wife hadn't been home last night. "Mum, I'll call you back," he said sharply into the phone. "I can't talk now, there's something I need to find out." In a few minutes, Calvin knew that together with Barbara, their suitcase, with which they had recently traveled to the sea, had disappeared from the flat. His wife Barbara's personal belongings in the wardrobe had also disappeared. There was no point in even thinking about it. The young woman could only have gone to her parents. Calvin brewed himself a cup of coffee, found last night's dinner in the fridge, ate a cold chicken, and thought about it. Then he dialed his mother's number and went on the offensive. "Can you imagine? My wife is going to have a baby. How does it happen in this position?" and asked interestedly. Did she fly in, or what? Was surprised by the potential grandmother on the other end of the line. "Can you imagine?" Calvin replied. "It was an idiot's dream come true to have a screaming baby at my disposal." "How can you be so rude?" The woman raised her voice slightly. "Son, in a normal family, a baby is a normal thing. A natural result of a man and a woman living together." "But you, Mother, don't start lecturing me now," he interrupted. "I've already expressed my position on the matter. I offered her to terminate the pregnancy. But she's stubborn. She packed her bags and went to her parents in the suburbs. What am I supposed to do? Get on my knees? Talk her into coming home? His impassioned speech had no effect. His mother's response was merciless. You're going to clean yourself up right now. I can hear in your voice that you were pretty drunk last night. You're going to Barbara's parents, and you're bringing your pregnant wife home. Your father and I have always indulged your little foibles. We've spared you no expense, no effort. But I don't want my son to be a scoundrel, forcing his wife to run away from home when she's pregnant. Mum, but I don't want to become a father at 22, whimpered the misunderstood Calvin. This decision is final and cannot be appealed. His mother cut him off and pressed the disconnect button. Calvin realized that he was not even between hammer and anvil. On the other side of the barricade, where not only his wife but also his parents were the opposing side, he had no doubt that his father would also take his mother's side. With a frustrated sigh, Calvin headed for the shower. There was nothing to be done. He would have to go. He reached Barbara's hometown at about 3 in the morning. The day was slipping towards evening. The orange orb of the sun was slowly going to rest somewhere in the neighboring yards. Dogs barked, alarmed by its footsteps. It was as if the street had died out, though quite a few people had come out to the station with him. It was as if they had all vanished into thin air. There were no other villages nearby. A whole crowd got off the local bus with him. Many people knew him here, especially those who had enjoyed their wedding. They had celebrated it twice, so as not to offend anyone. First in the city, in a restaurant, in the circle of his parents' acquaintances, and then in the village, right in the yard to an old cassette recorder. And then, as usual, an accordion with folk songs. Calvin had never understood this rural tradition of inviting everyone to the table, but Barbara had told him straight away. A girl's wedding is her most important holiday. Even those young ladies who do not make a cult out of it dream of showing off in a white dress in front of many spectators, and I am no exception. Looking over the fence, Calvin noted that all his wife's family was at home. He'd have to confront his wife in front of witnesses. He pushed open the gate and froze. Olivia was looking at him from the window. He realized at once that she already knew about his quarrel with his wife. Yeah, well, there was nothing to do. He squared his shoulders and strode proudly to the porch. No one came out to meet him. He hesitated in the hallway, and then his wife appeared at the door with eyes full of vague hope. Maybe he's changed his mind. He'll apologize to her now, and everything will be as it was before. And then Calvin, instead of repenting, calming his beloved, saying that he had been wrong, had overreacted, froze in his tracks. It was as if demons were playing in him. He suddenly looked angrily at his wife and hissed, "I thought about whether you and I need a child. My answer is still no." Barbara turned pale. Her thoughts were dashing feverishly. "He's a stranger. He's a complete stranger to me. I'll carry the baby, I'll hide the baby. He will be mine alone." In the room beyond the wall, Christian and Olivia jumped at once at the sight of Emma convulsing in her chair. They were already aware of the scandal in Barbara's family, of course, but they decided to give the young people a chance to talk it over again. They stayed out of it for the time being. Emma was still hysterical, pointing out of the window, sobbing, whispering, "It's bad. It's bad. It's bad." Christian jumped out into the yard just as Calvin grinned mockingly, spat contemptuously on the ground through his teeth, and shouted, "1 month I give you, wife, to dispose of this gift. It's either me or the baby." What happened next was like a slow-motion film from a melodrama. The father-in-law grabbed Calvin by the scruff of his jacket, pushed him out the gate, and said angrily, "Don't you ever set foot here again, you lousy puppy. We'll raise our grandson or granddaughter ourselves without such a daddy. Don't you dare set your nose here again. What kind of puppy are you? Dogs are loyal creatures, and you, as I see it, have no idea what loyalty to a loved one is. Get out of here." Calvin stumbled to the bus stop to get to the railway station. It was getting dark. It was likely that the last train into town had already left, but he wasn't thinking about that right now. Trying on the empty platform, he negotiated with a local taxi driver. The good thing about money at his parents' expense was that he was not constrained. In town, Calvin decided to stop by that nice bar to drown his father-in-law's humiliation in brandy degrees. Nothing, He would somehow find common ground with his parents in this matter. They won't give up their only favorite son. Or would they still defend their decision? May did not meet the guy that night and went to a familiar bar alone, without any curious friends. What was her surprise when the young man walked into the bar and even more upset feelings. He went straight to the bar and ordered a large portion of cognac. He drained the glass in a gulp and looked round the room, which was almost empty before closing time. The time was approaching midnight. May didn't waste any time. When else would she get a chance like this? She put on the mask not of a femme fatale, but of a slightly sad girl puzzled by some problems of her own. She slowly approached the bar, smiled at the bartender as if with effort, and said, "I'm not having a good day today. Pour me something stronger, please. It may be unseemly for a lady to drink, but I don't have an ounce of socialite in me right now." Calvin turned round interestedly, thinking, "Someone else's current day has gone wrong. I'm not alone in my sadness," he said aloud. "Let's drink to all the good things together. There are good things." May pretended that she only noticed that she was not alone at the bar. She shook her ashy hair beautifully, opened her blue eyes wide with long, thick, black, skillfully painted lashes. "Come on, young man, where has our life been yet?" Calvin ordered a martini for the lady. For some reason, he was too shy to offer her a cognac. They talked about nothing. They had much in common in their preferences for cinema, music, and books. Both of them were quite educated, moderately intelligent, quite advanced people. Even the barman began to look at them with a sidelong glance. The establishment worked according to the system of service to the last visitor, and these two did nothing, completely dissolved in each other. He was already nervously, while they were talking, looking at them with the look of a faithful dog, which it was time to walk. And the glasses had to be polished 10 times over. It was no use. Calvin and May sipped slowly from their glasses. They were talking about something again, and even laughing. The bartender had given up hope of spending the rest of the night in his bed. And then the sweet couple suddenly got up and went somewhere quickly. He only heard the end of their conversation. The man happily said that he was going to order a taxi for the lady. And the lady told him that after such a heart-to-heart conversation, she would like to invite him to her place for a cup of coffee. That was quick. How did it work out for them, involuntarily thought the employee of the drinking establishment, locking the door behind the last customers. Why am I surprised, though? How many people come to our bar separately and then leave together? How does Pushkin put it? A cruel age, cruel hearts nowadays, everything is easy and simple. An age soft on morality, hearts easy on disposable love. I'm getting a little philosophical with fatigue. Home, hurry home, and go to bed. And Calvin was tenderly hugging his new acquaintance May by the shoulders in the back seat of some foreign car. He didn't even look at the model of the car out of joy. May's unexpected offer to continue the evening at her house threw him at first into some confusion, then encouraged him. Well, let Bridget be a mum-to-be. Other women are interested in me. Now I'll prove it to her and myself. That night was a vivid revelation to both of them. May, who had already had some experience, had never met such a man. Calvin, to his amazement, realized that intimacy with his wife, which had seemed a miracle to him, was far from sensual perfection. It was just before morning when they both collapsed powerlessly on the pillows. Satisfied with each other, they fell asleep almost simultaneously. Calvin only had time to think. Life's getting better. A couple of hours later, his happy mood was dampened by a call from his mother. Calvin, I'm waiting for news. Are you home from Barbara's yet? My father and I are going to buy some sweets tonight and come over for tea. We'd like to congratulate our daughter-in-law on becoming a mom. It's a very exciting event for every woman. What time do you usually get home? From class. Calvin freed himself from May's embrace, who had fallen serenely asleep on his shoulder. Calvin looked around. His parents absolutely had to know nothing about him waking up in a strange bed with May. He would very much like to continue this wonderful companionship, but introducing her to his parents would be a wild thing to do. Mum, don't worry, he said into the phone. We had a productive talk with Barbara and her parents. Together we decided that it would be a good idea for her to stay with them a little longer. Autumn is pleasantly warm so far. The orchard is full of wonderful apples. The vitamins and fresh air won't hurt her mum-to-be. And in a week I'll go and pick her up and bring her home. We'll make up for it at university. It won't be a problem. Calvin couldn't even explain to himself why he had taken this time out from his mother. Maybe it would have been better to announce that their marriage to Barbara was over. They would each go their separate ways. But Calvin didn't dare give this information to his mother. This night had been too dreamy, too much to think about. May woke up and stretched sweetly like a contented, satisfied cat. Calvin didn't need to know that her parents had nurtured and cherished her always, like a fragile and delicate flower. Cultivated in her the notion that she was a princess, a girl who should know no worries or troubles. She never knew denial of any of her whims. For 3 years, she had been living in her own flat, which she was given after successfully completing her first year of university. She chose a purely female profession, economist. To be fair, there are also many economists among men, but May in this area imagined the male sex only in the position of chief financial officer, nothing less. And all these high regalia were not important. She wanted a man who was wealthy, handsome and intelligent, to be a colorful addition to him. Calvin seemed to her just such a promising option. She would do her best to find out more about his far-reaching plans for her life. The fact that the man was married, about to become a father, didn't bother May in the least. It was a warm and sunny autumn morning. Outside the window, a magical golden autumn reigned. She and Calvin were about to have coffee and pancakes. Yesterday she ran in and her mother left her daughter a whole container of ruddy, fried scones with cottage cheese, and then outside to walk through the rustling yellow dirty leaves. To breathe the pleasant air, filled with the last scents of autumn flowers still in bloom. To stop by some pastry shop, where they know how to make delicious little cakes with prefabricated cream, her favorite treat. Emma had been hysterical for several hours after Calvin's arrival. It was the first time it had happened. Christian and Olivia no longer knew how to calm their youngest daughter at the grocery shop near their home. Olivia met Agnes later that day. That first heartache patient who had once been so warmed by Emma's touch. The women got to talking. Agnes was very enthusiastic about meeting the young doctor who had traveled from the city to see their disabled son. "He is extraordinary," she said. "This young doctor specializes in the moral rehabilitation of young patients. A psychologist from God, he tries to make their lives more fulfilling, more lively, to adapt them to society." "And what methods does he use?" Olivia was immediately interested. "What do you think, neighbor? Maybe it makes sense to show him our Emma when he comes to visit you next time." "What he does and how he does it, I can't tell you," Agnes replied. "He talks to his charges in private. What I do know is that my son is always enthusiastic after his visits. His eyes shine with joy. He no longer feels so sad about his situation as a sedentary patient. Even on the street on his wheelchair now began to show up without undue strain. And recently Lucy, a young girl whose boyfriend died in the conscription service because of an accident, started to look in our house. She and my son would go to the bench outside the yard and talk about something for hours. Somehow I couldn't resist my curiosity." May listened to what Lucy was saying at the time. "I still can't get her words out of my head," she said to Olivia. "She was right," she said to Olivia. "What did she say?" Olivia couldn't resist asking. "I won't repeat it verbatim, but the general meaning was like this," Agnes explained. "God, I'm glad you're alive. If my beloved had come back from the service wounded and maimed, I would still be with him all the time that heaven has given us." The women were silent, immersed in thought. Only each of them was thinking to herself about her own misfortune. Each knew what her friend in misfortune was thinking now. There is nothing worse than looking at your child and knowing that he is doomed to a different life than the rest of the human race. Unbearable, they thought. Sometimes this hidden inner pain. Accepting it over time is possible. To accept it is hardly possible. Agnes promised Olivia that she would get a sensible doctor to see Emma next Tuesday, and so they parted. They both hurried home to their eternal chores. Agnes was not deceived. She had fulfilled her promise. On Tuesday, a handsome young man in his 30s knocked on Christian and Olivia's door. If the owners had been asked what his first impression was, they would have said with one voice, "A good one." David was a pleasant, charming, intelligent doctor. He made it clear right away that he wanted to talk to his mom alone. And the girl herself didn't object in the least. They talked for over an hour, and then David agreed to have dinner with them. It was getting dusk outside the window. It was a good time to get together at a cozy table. David got to talking to Barbara. The woman herself did not realize how she had managed to tell him that she was pregnant and that she wanted the baby very much. But her husband did not approve of her decision to give birth. The doctor looked at her carefully and replied, "Men often come to maturity much later than women. Most think about it when they see the baby. Their paternal heart starts beating more frequently. But there is a certain category of gentlemen to whom children are only a hindrance in life. It's a waste of time to rehabilitate them," David concluded. After a delicious dinner, which David praised, Barbara volunteered to escort him to the bus stop. "You know, I don't mind," said the nice doctor. "It would do you good in your condition. The bus stop isn't far. The lanterns in the village are working properly. Mums-to-be need fresh air like air." And he laughed at his joke without being embarrassed. "Tautology, Barbara," he explained. He was incredibly easy to be with. There was no need to think about what you wanted to say, no need to choose words, no need to be afraid of sensitive topics that affected her ego. This psychologist had clearly chosen his profession for a reason. Emma had not had a single tantrum during the week. Not once had she stomped her feet or thrown her toys. Barbara had met her soulmate. That was the impression David had left on her. David took the train into town and reminisced. Olivia hadn't misjudged his age. 6 months ago, he had been 30 years old. 15 of those years he'd spent making sure that people with disabilities, and congenital diseases smiled at the new day. Their family was considered a real medical dynasty. At the same time, they were not arrogant in the least. David's grandfather was a renowned geologist. His grandmother worked all her life as a nurse in a neurological dispensary. All 3 sons then followed in their footsteps. The eldest became an oncologist, the middle one a surgeon, the youngest a traumatologist. When the only son David was born in the family of the youngest, no one could think that he would want to become a professional psychologist. He loved her very much, his desk mate, his classmate, his childhood friend Sally. David had grown up to be such a tough kid, tall and broad-shouldered beyond his years. He was angular at first, and then he became stately. He and the new girl were put at the same desk in 5th grade. She was thin, a little pale, and very, in his terms, beautiful. Even a short haircut for a boy did not spoil it, on the contrary, made her huge gray eyes somehow very piercing, bottomless, a little pitiful. After a week, he started bringing bright yellow apples with small freckles for her from home. She loved them very much. Sally came from a broken home. Her mother got a job at school with the girl and worked as a cleaner. David and Sally's classmates tried to make barbs about the girl, but he stopped them so sharply and decisively that no one seriously began to mess with the tall boy. Sally didn't want to go to the costume New Year's Eve ball for the middle schoolers. Her mother didn't have the money for what she called a waste of money. So David brought her home for the first time, and he and her mother made Sally a costume of Maya, the little bee from her favorite cartoon, out of gauze, gold tinsel, and black paper. By the ornate Christmas tree on stage, when the costume contest was held, Sally's big eyes made a sensation. The main prize, for some reason a huge blue teddy bear, almost as big as Sally herself, was immediately handed to her by the head teacher. On the 8th of March, in the 6th form, David's mom bought a real Barbie doll for her son's friend. There was no limit to the envy of the girls in the class, but David and Sally had not been interested in all those envious glances for a long time. They walked to and from school holding hands. David was always the first to go to the cafeteria, and he took 2 glasses of tomato juice and sandwiches with Doctor's sausage. After a quick snack, they would run into the classroom to go over the assignment together. Both of them studied only for A's. Sally, petite and wearing a short-sleeved shirt, had become almost a full-fledged member of David's family. After school, they would go straight to his house, where lunch was waiting for them on the cooker. Warming up soup, mashed potatoes, or pilaf, they quickly demolished it all. In good weather, they would go for a little walk in the neighboring park. In cold and inclement weather, they would watch adventure films or fantasy on TV. Their views and taste matched in almost everything they did together. Sally's mom looked past their friendship. The perpetually tired woman had no time to check who her daughter was spending time with and how much time she was spending with them. No problems with her studies, that was fine. A terrible misfortune fell on Sally and David slowly, but rapidly. Once on another winter holiday they went, as usual, to the skating rink. Suddenly a little figure skater, who skates very well, fainted right on the ice screaming with lights. David, who came up to her, somehow immediately realized that the matter was serious. He picked up the bee in his arms and dragged her to the medical center of the entertainment center, where the skating rink was located. A businesslike woman doctor from the ambulance dictated clearly teenage girl, 15 years old, I assume a heart attack. David went to the hospital with Sally. You should have seen the confused state he was in. The crew allowed him to take a reclining seat in the back of the car. On the way he got everyone up on their feet, his grandfather, his father, his mother, his uncle. Half an hour later, everyone who could support David in his time of need had arrived at the hospital's emergency room. The diagnosis was devastating. A gray-haired cardiologist came out to them and announced that the girl had a neglected congenital heart defect. Hadn't any of you doctors ever noticed that she might have had sudden blue lips? Weakness? He asked. David stepped forward. I spend whole days with her. There's never even been a hint that she has a health problem. She's ahead of the curve in PE. She rarely missed a class. She's on par with everyone else in class. What can I tell you, dear colleagues? Answered the cardiologist. The girl seems to have a strong, courageous character. She naturally felt sick, but did not show it. Her ailing heart had weakened, and then there was the slightly delayed age of transition. If she'd had heart surgery as a child, she'd have forgotten about it long ago. We're going to rush her into surgery now, but only a miracle can save her. There was no miracle. Sally's heart stopped. 2 hours later, David's heart stopped right there on the operating table with it. And in the cemetery, among the wreaths of snow-white flowers, David's sturdy figure in a dark jacket seemed from afar like a rock, a monolith frozen by grief. Even those closest to him did not realize what he had put in the coffin for his faithful friend. It was a last gift, a sign of very great love and tenderness. The guy spent the whole day going around all the toy shops until he found a small but very colorful bee Maya in one of them. When the first clods of earth began to fall on the coffin lid, David walked to the edge of the grave and said, I never got round to telling you that I love you. I was afraid you'd laugh, because we were only friends. I promise that I will devote my life to curing the deprived, unaccompanied hearts of longing. In your memory, my love. Without you, my world is empty. David kept his vow to his beloved friend, as they say, bulldozed into his studies after her death. He graduated from school with a silver medal, entered the medical university on a budget without problems. All his free time was spent with scientific literature of the medical field. Already in the third year, I knew quite well the works of Carl Jung, Freud, Karlin, Corley, Zinchenko, Grigorenko, Kuzmina. He absorbed their thoughts and conclusions, judgments, sometimes not remembering to whom they originally belonged. But he absorbed everything in a row, as a sponge absorbs water. The boy was not a monk. He understood perfectly well that to keep himself in austerity is at least stupid. He was successful with his classmates, had brief flings, but no one managed to melt the ice in his heart. At first, such hot attempts in his address, many young ladies still undertook, but soon realized that this always a little gloomy young man is not believed in any female tricks. Why he behaved like that remained a mystery. His sad love story was known only to those closest to him. They were not going to talk about it. Then David had a long practice. He asked for a part-time job in the neurological dispensary, where his grandmother once worked. David assessed the situation soberly. Mentally ill people, and those who survived the tragedy, remaining mentally healthy but lost due to their grief. For society, these are two big differences. The public in the treatment center was diverse. For himself, he singled out a few cases where it seemed to him that mental illness was a natural extension of the immense grief of losing a loved one. Evelyn, 40, had been admitted to a neurological institution after she began wandering around the entryway dressed as a ghost. She could not accept that her beloved husband had been killed in a car crash. He came to her in sweet dreams almost every day, saying that he was near, just lives now in a parallel world. All she has to do is reach out her hand. Evelyn learned her lessons from her nocturnal visits with her husband and made herself a costume of an inhabitant of otherworldly worlds. Wore it when dusk fell. Then she looked for her soulmate outside the house, in the entrance, scaring the neighbors and passers-by. In the daytime, the woman became herself again, lived her usual withdrawn life quietly and peacefully. The respectable people did not approve of such night ghost phenomena. They wrote a report to the district police. Evelyn was taken to the dispensary quickly, and then she finally became despondent. Her husband stopped visiting her at night. She began to think seriously about leaving the world. So she would be more reliable, it seems, with him in that favorable, otherworldly world, and then her husband would be there again. The head doctor was rather skeptical about David's initiative to work with this woman. "Father, you've chosen a difficult case, both quiet and violent at the same time. We keep Evelyn on medication all the time. She sleeps all day long. I can't think of anything wrong with her. But I want to bring her back to a full life," objected the young specialist. "A beautiful woman, she was a businesswoman. But what has she turned into? We must make her happy again with summer sunshine, winter fluffy snow, autumn beauty of fallen-colored leaves, and spring delicate aroma of mimosa sprigs." The old professor smirked and added an admonition only at the end of the dialogue. "Our basic principle is to do no harm. And remember, then act boldly." Evelyn was lying idly on the bed when David appeared in the ward. Her only advantage over many of the other patients was that her younger sister May had arranged for her to have a separate apartment with cozy furnishings, a large television set, and bouquets of fresh flowers in elegant vases. You wouldn't know it was a hospital. It had a homely atmosphere. David had no plan to bring the woman out of her deepest stress. He stared at the pretty patient in silence for a moment, then suddenly decided to sit down and tell her about his personal experience. In the middle of his monologue, Evelyn changed her position and turned round to face him. At the end, she asked him a question in a muffled voice. "And how did you, doctor, manage to cope with the inner emptiness and acute loneliness?" David, without hesitation, said, "I decided to dedicate myself to people who were also in the midst of hopelessness." "I love my dog," Evelyn suddenly said, "but I can't afford to have a friend at home. My business involves constant traveling. I won't be in treatment forever." David had an idea. "You know, Evelyn, my close friend Christian runs a dog shelter with his parents. I'll talk to your doctor today. Maybe he'll let you and I go there together." The woman smiled miserably. "I'll be grateful to you, David, and I promise I won't make any more attempts to collect more pills, to drink them all at once. When you're alone with a big grief, people around you are just as serene. It starts to feel like you've been dealt such a terrible fate. Your story showed me that there is a lot of grief around. It's just that people live in it like a tough shell, not showing the world what hell is going on inside them." A fortnight later, Evelyn was discharged from the dispensary. During this time, they had already made 2 trips with David to the shelter, where the woman couldn't resist taking home a large Labrador puppy. "You know, David," she shared with her handler on the way back, "I've decided to make a radical change in my life. I'm no longer attracted to my cosmetics business. I've already offered to buy out my salon chain to a longtime competitor. I'm sure she won't miss this chance to get her hands on a place that's popular with women. And I got the idea to set up my own kennel. I want to breed pedigree Labradors, to give people the joy of communication with these wonderful dogs." The head doctor of the dispensary congratulated David on his first victory. He added that almost every ward of the medical center needs such a soulful, individual approach. How many destinies, broken lives can be redirected with simple words? What new horizons can a person who believes in himself again reach? He pondered aloud. Then there were many, young and old, who were able to accept grief and move on, and those who were never able to come to terms with the misfortune that had befallen them. David's tactics were always the same. He tried to reliably switch the person to something very important, very interesting, to leave no chance to get off the new path. There were failures in his work, but on the whole, the method worked amazingly well. A mother who lost her son and fell into a deep depression, he arranged to volunteer in an orphanage. A lonely old maid who had long ago lost hope for personal happiness after the death of her mother was assigned as an apprentice to a master in men's haircuts. A year later, she met in the salon with a single father with 2 children. Now she lives happily ever after. That's how David walked through life, helping those suffering to get rid of the oppression of circumstances without looking back. At first, he treated Barbara and Emma with condescension, taking them for just another unattached, but spoilt young ladies who had had a lot of injustice in their lives. Barbara shuddered with fear for a long time, and if someone knocked on the gate, she waited for Calvin's remorse and forgiveness. Then she decided to go to correspondence school. The once burning desire to study classical English literature somehow subsided. Later, David generally convinced her that with such a love for children from her will be an excellent teacher of Russian language and literature. After her maternity leave, he advised her to change her specialization and devote herself to pedagogy. Emma, and Dave, as she called him briefly, was also very fond of him. With his help, she learned to get out of her wheelchair and back into it easily, and to move around the house and garden a little on her own. However, she still preferred her mentor to be somewhere near her. Barbara's belly had already rounded up considerably. She was a couple of months away from giving birth. Winter was over, with all its long, magical holidays. Spring was blooming with the blossoming of fruit trees. The day was getting longer and the nights seemed shorter. David found himself looking forward to Tuesday more and more often. He couldn't wait to see Barbara again. Suddenly, he found himself watching her as she poured his coffee, sliced apples for jam, and did her simple hairdo. This young woman seemed so cozy and homely to him. At times, Barbara would fall silent, as if listening to herself, trying to determine what her long-awaited baby was doing. Then her face would always light up with a smile, and David would avert his eyes in embarrassment, thinking that she looked like Madonna, as innocent and perfect. After a while, the man realized it had happened. He had fallen in love again with Barbara, who was due to give birth in a couple of weeks. He didn't share his feelings. This young woman had already gone through the betrayal of a loved one and was able to overcome it honorably. But David was not sure that in Barbara's soul there was no hope that her husband would come at least to meet her from the maternity hospital to see her son. The ultrasound had long ago revealed that Barbara was having a boy, and she hoped he would mellow out and want to be near his family. Calvin hadn't shown up once in all this time. Only his parents came to visit with an unexpected offer to sell the flat and return the money invested in it to Barbara's parents. The boy would have to be raised, brought up, educated. The mother-in-law considered her decision wise and logical. Barbara herself remained silent during this conversation. David was right, she still hoped in her heart that time could be turned back. Despite the fact that, according to her mother-in-law, Calvin was already living with another woman. She knew her husband well. He'd made a mistake, fallen for some other woman. She's pregnant, not so attractive now. Vain hopes, vain tears in the pillow at night, a woman's loneliness. Calvin lived for his own pleasure, barely remembering his family. Calvin and May initially hid their relationship from the man's parents for a long time. At his request, May pursued with persistence the cherished goal of winding up and marrying Calvin. She sat by his side when he needed to do his studies. Although she was a year older, May successfully defended her degree and got a job as an aspiring economist in a small firm. Calvin passed the session, moved to the final year, became a good employee in a law firm, where he recently got a part-time job. Now he was an assistant lawyer on family cases there on full rights of a staff member. In the law firm, no one guessed that career success clever Calvin was due to a quiet, modest, but clearly talented guy who came to the lawyers to practice. The newcomer had a phenomenal instinct for successful, profitable deals. He did not get involved in the cases himself, but a couple of times hinted to Calvin for which divorce proceedings should be taken up and which litigation companies to join. Having already won twice in complex litigation, Calvin suggested to the chief the best line of behavior. He was going to take his new girlfriend May somewhere in Turkey, Tunisia, or Egypt. Suddenly he was shocked to hear from his own mum. "Son, I turned a blind eye to your relationship with May. I thought you would come to your senses and think about it. But my hopes were not fulfilled. There's not much time left before our grandson is born. Father and I don't want to be mean and greedy people. I'll give you a week to vacate the flat. We'll sell it. It is decided to give all the money to your wife to support the boy." Looking ahead, we can tell you that Calvin's conscience about welcoming his wife and son from the maternity hospital did not even think of waking up. On the day of the birth of his child, he slept serenely at home. The holidays after the session were in full swing. Then he went to the supermarket to buy a couple of bottles of wine for dinner. That evening, Calvin had his first nervous conversation with May. She was so used to living in a spacious two-bedroom flat that she didn't want to move the two of them into her studio flat. From here, her work was within walking distance. The infrastructure here wasn't the same as near her own flat on the outskirts. Another ultimatum appeared in Calvin's piggy bank. "We've been together for over 6 months, honey. It's time to make a decision. What are your plans for me? If we are to have a real family, not just a cozy pastime, you will take responsibility and provide your woman with both a place to live and means to live. Exactly a trouble-free existence." The man was at first a little taken aback by such a statement, but then he remembered a busy conversation with a talented trainee. In his mind, he instantly conceived a plan to earn a decent sum of money for at least a year of the life to which May was accustomed. He could no longer do without this resourceful person, hot, beautiful companion at all the parties in their youth group, surprisingly even sometimes a good hostess. Calvin had no way of knowing that May's friend's cleaning company did the cleaning in his flat, and that the pickles in the fridge came from orders placed at cafes and restaurants. "There will be a beautiful life for you, and there will be prosperity," Calvin proudly replied to his friend. Inappropriately recalling the children's poem "The Old Man," which his mother liked to read to him before bedtime, Calvin said, "I have a plan. I'm sure it will work." May's gratitude gave Calvin even more confidence that the plan would go well. The next day, he didn't go to work, he ran there. Calvin's plan was simple. Yesterday, stammering, blushing and pale, an intern had told him that a client had made him an indecent proposal. Calvin had thought at first that the customer's outburst was of a different nature, but it turned out to be otherwise. The client offered the guy to steal one of the documents in the case of divorce proceedings with his wife. Deprived of such a strong argument, the woman was losing everything. The proud young employee rejected the offer with indignation, and Calvin decided to take advantage of it. Contacting the unscrupulous mate was easy. All his contacts were on file, as they should be. Calvin set up a meeting with the slippery fellow in a cafe on the other side of town. He did the deed. Then it was over. Inexperienced in such matters, the employee of the law firm did not take into account only one nuance: the wife of the scoundrel was not a bad guy either. She has long ago hired a private investigator who constantly monitored the movements of almost ex-spouse. Further could unfold a fascinating story. The offended woman was like a wildcat. She appeared in front of the spouse at the moment of the exchange. Angered by the perfidy, the wife did not come alone, but with the press, and in the evening stories about the corruption of the lawyer's world were shown on all the local news channels. Calvin's name was instantly blacklisted from all legal services. To get a job in his profession, he could now only somewhere in Zimbabwe, and even then unlikely. Calvin's parents raised all their connections, trying to hush up a criminal case on several articles at once. Calvin was facing serious charges. He didn't get away with it. Given the large size of the reward, the court sentenced him to 2 years imprisonment in a penal colony with a substantial fine. May, who had unwittingly inspired Calvin's aspirations to get a lot of things at once, vanished from his flat in an instant. Ubiquitous journalists quickly found the girlfriend of the hero of the day, but she refused to comment, muttering a pre-prepared phrase. No comment. Barbara learned about what happened to her husband much later from his parents, who brought money and gifts for their recently born grandson. Named Christian after his grandfather, the baby never learned that his birth father had not wanted him before he was born, and later ended up in prison for dishonest intentions to enrich himself without labor. On the day that little Christian was born, Barbara was driven to the hospital in a car David had recently acquired in an amazing way. The doctor had an almost fantastic story with this car. He lived in average conditions, wrote his PhD thesis, worked extensively with patients in the city and region, but never charged inflated fees for his appointments. Everything according to the price list of the clinic. Once a very old grandmother from a distant village turned to him. Her grandson was a biker and had crashed his motorbike. The old woman could not forgive herself that God had taken him young and left her, the owner of the gorgeous flower beds. The flowers were still growing and blooming, but her own child was gone. It took David more than one session with Granny and the gardener to turn her attention back to the flowers that needed care. The last time he was about to leave for the train, Grandma stopped him. "Son, wait. I have one more thing to do for you. Hold the paper. You read it carefully." David's eyes widened when he saw the contents of the document on letterhead with watermarks. It was a gift deed in his name for a blue BMW car. "Yeah, no," David said, embarrassed by this. David bought it from his grandmother, who and her grandson lived alone in the whole wide world. He's a loner. "I'm an old lady, God's dandelion. His parents died. I brought him up. He is late, they had a child. They all traveled around the world to Elbrus, and in their box traveled. My grandson wasn't poor, he was a businessman. This is his car, just for the parade. He used it. All on this iron friend of his, until it ruined him. You use it, son. I had a neighborhood officer help me with the paperwork. It's all according to the law." And that's how Dr. David got a shiny blue car. After the discharge, Barbara was welcomed by the whole team. Amanda, Bridget, and her family came to the village to celebrate the occasion. Christian, Olivia, and Emma stood with large bouquets of flowers. And David held a cake for the staff and a bundle of colorful inflatable balloons. Barbara froze with a bundle with a baby in her arms and admired him fondly against the clear azure sky. He looked very cute in his new light-colored shirt with the collar open. Suddenly, one of the red balloons, painted with hearts, burst with a deafening sound. Barbara laughed and suddenly realized that she no longer loved her husband Calvin. The magic was over. The last illusions melted away. After serving his sentence, Calvin returned to the city. He did not like to talk about his stay in prison. On all questions, parents answered sparingly. He was now legally unable to get a job as a lawyer. May changed her phone number. Through mutual acquaintances, he learned that she was about to marry some fashion designer with great prospects. Emma was upbeat. She had long ago disproved the doctor's assumptions that she was destined for a short life. The villagers still came to her to look into her kind eyes and believe in a bright future. She paid attention to everyone. She was still the sunny little girl that Betty the witch doctor saw in her. David and Barbara had a daughter, Megan, a year ago. There was no other name for her, her parents had decided. Dr. David has finally moved to the village, settling into his inpatient office. Now people from both the city and the region were coming to see him. Calvin carefully washed a window in the restaurant, fulfilling the task of the cleaning company, which he miraculously managed to get a job in. A chance meeting with May's friend, who had been in the cleaning business for a long time, had helped. This young lady was once very jealous of May and had a little crush on her handsome boyfriend. Now Calvin has already lost his former gloss, has become somehow vague and shabby. A woman's heart is not made of stone. The owner of the cleaning company really needed a tall, strong worker, not afraid of heights. Her female employees were afraid of working at heights. Word of mouth, she offered Calvin the vacant position. He enthusiastically accepted. I must say, he was surprisingly fast and high quality, as if he was born for this job. Now the man in overalls, carefully rubbing the shiny surface with a special compound, began to rub the formed deposit of thick white foam over the entire area of the glass. A blue foreign car pulled up in front of the restaurant. An imposing man came out of the saloon, holding the hand of a boy of about 3 or 4 years old. Next to him, a lovely woman with a little girl in a beautiful dress in her arms stood proudly. Calvin couldn't believe his eyes at first. It was his ex-wife Barbara, but so charming, full of aristocratic dignity. And when he thought, we have English roots, hence the lords and ladies. Misty Albion. No wonder he splashed the foam on the glass once more, endeavoring to rub the surface of it to an incredible luster. It seemed to him now that this was his way of washing his tangled soul. He had once dropped his dignity, his happiness, and his future to the ground. Would he be able to pick it up?